Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto fell for Ino instead of Sakura? And subscribe if you enjoy the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. Uzumaki Naruto, Iruka had called, and the room had fallen silent for just a moment too long. Now, as the lunch break began and children scattered across the academy grounds, Naruto sat under a tree, unwrapping the instant ramen he prepared that morning. It was cold and congealed, but it was food, and he ate it mechanically while watching the other kids play. A group of boys about his age were tossing a ball back and forth near the training posts. Naruto's eyes followed the ball's arc, and he felt a familiar ache in his chest, the longing to be included, to be part of something. He stood, brushing off his orange pants, and walked toward them with what he hoped was a friendly smile. "Hey! Can I play?" Naruto called out, his voice a bit too loud, a bit too eager. The boys stopped. The one holding the ball, a stocky kid with brown hair, looked Naruto up and down with an expression that made Naruto's smile falter. "No," the boy said flatly. "We don't play with your kind, Naruto's kind." He'd heard variations of that phrase before, whispered behind hands, spoken in tones that ranged from fear to disgust. He still didn't fully understand what it meant, only that it somehow applied to him, and made him different in a way that mattered to everyone else. "Come on," Naruto tried again, forcing the smile back onto his face even though it felt like cracking stone. "I'm really good at catching. I can." "I said no." The brown-haired boy threw the ball, not to one of his friends, but directly at Naruto's face. The orange sphere caught him in the nose, and Naruto stumbled backward, eyes watering from the sharp pain. Laughter erupted from the group. Other children nearby turned to watch, some pointing, some giggling, none intervening. Naruto felt his cheeks burn, not just from the impact, but from the humiliation that seemed to wrap around him like chains. "Demon brat," one of the boys muttered, just loud enough for Naruto to hear. The words struck harder than the ball. Demon. He'd heard it before, usually from adults who thought he couldn't understand, or who didn't care if he did, but hearing it from another kid, someone who should be his peer, his potential friend, it carved something hollow in his chest. Naruto clenched his fists. His vision blurred, though whether from tears or anger, he wasn't sure. The smart thing would be to walk away, to find another corner to hide in until classes resumed. That's what the old man would probably advise: patience, restraint, proving himself through hard work and time. But Naruto had never been particularly smart, and the hollow feeling in his chest was filled with something hot and reckless. "Take it back!" he shouted, and before he could think better of it, he charged at the brown-haired boy. He didn't get far. The boy's friends, older and larger, grabbed Naruto by the arms and shoved him to the ground. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, and suddenly he was staring up at the sky, ringed by faces twisted with contempt or cruel amusement. "You think you can attack us?" The brown-haired boy sneered, standing over Naruto. "You really are a demon, aren't you? My dad says you should have been." "That's enough." The voice cut through the air like a kunai, sharp and commanding despite its feminine pitch. The boys around Naruto froze, and he craned his neck to see who had spoken. She stood a few feet away, hands on her hips, long platinum blonde hair catching the sunlight like spun gold. She wore a purple outfit that somehow looked both practical and elegant, and her pale blue eyes were fixed on Naruto's attackers with an intensity that made even them take a step back. "Ino," the brown-haired boy said, and his voice had lost some of its bravado. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when I see a bunch of boys ganging up on someone half their size." "The girl," Ino replied coolly. "That's not what ninja do. That's what cowards do." Naruto, still on the ground, could only stare. He recognized her from class, Ino Yamanaka, one of the popular kids who always seemed to be surrounded by friends and admirers. She was known for being confident, pretty, and completely out of his league in every social hierarchy he'd observed during his few hours at the academy. And yet here she was, defending him. "He started it," one of the other boys protested weakly. "He asked to play, and you threw a ball in his face," Ino countered. "I saw the whole thing. Now, you can either apologize and walk away, or I can go tell Iruka-sensei exactly what happened. Maybe I'll mention how your father always says such interesting things about the Hokage's decisions." Her smile was sweet as honey and twice as dangerous. I'm sure the Hokage would love to hear about it. The threat hung in the air. The boys exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Finally, the brown-haired boy spat on the ground near Naruto's feet, close enough to be insulting, far enough to claim it wasn't directed at him, and stalked off. His friends followed, shooting dark looks back at both Naruto and Ino. Silence settled over the training grounds. The other children who'd been watching quickly dispersed, suddenly very interested in their own activities. And then it was just Naruto, still on the ground, and Ino, who had turned her attention fully to him. She extended a hand. Naruto looked at it as if she'd offered him a live explosive tag. In his 6 years of life, the number of people who had voluntarily touched him without disgust or fear could be counted on one hand. And most of those had been official touches, like the Hokage's reassuring pat on the shoulder or a doctor's clinical examination. Are you going to take it, or should I just stand here all day? Ino asked, but there was no meanness in her voice. If anything, she sounded amused. Slowly, hesitantly, Naruto reached up and took her hand. Her grip was firm and warm, and she pulled him to his feet with surprising strength. Standing, he realized she was actually slightly taller than him, a fact that would have embarrassed him under normal circumstances. But right now he was too shocked by the simple kindness of the gesture to care. Thank you, he managed to croak out, his voice rough from the lump in his throat. Ino dusted off his shoulders with casual efficiency, as if helping pariahs to their feet was something she did every day. Those boys are idiots. Don't let them get to you. Why did you help me? The question burst out before Naruto could stop it, desperate and raw. Everyone else just, why? For the first time, Ino's confident expression flickered. She looked at him, really looked at him, and Naruto felt exposed under that gaze, as if she could see every lonely night, every rejected overture, every moment of confusion about why the world treated him like a monster. My dad told me something once, Ino said finally, her voice softer than before. He said that the measure of a person isn't in how they treat those who can benefit them, but in how they treat those who can't. You looked like you needed help. She shrugged, as if it were that simple. Plus, those guys are jerks. I've been looking for an excuse to knock them down a peg. Naruto felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest, not the hollow ache he'd grown accustomed to, but something warm and bright. This girl, this popular, pretty girl who had no reason to care about him, had seen him as a person worth defending. Not a demon. Not a brat. Just someone who needed help. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, he said, even though she clearly already knew. And I'm going to be Hokage someday. He'd meant it to sound confident and impressive, but instead it came out earnest and a little desperate, like a promise he was making to himself as much as to her. Ino didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes or dismiss him. Instead, she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face from pretty to radiant. I'm Yamanaka Ino, she said, as if they were meeting at a formal introduction rather than in the aftermath of a schoolyard incident. And when you become Hokage, I'll be sure to remind you that I was your first real friend at the academy. Friend. The word echoed in Naruto's mind like a bell. Friend. He had a friend. Really? He breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Really, Ino confirmed. She glanced around the training grounds, then back at him. Have you eaten lunch yet? You look kind of pale. Naruto thought of the cold, congealed ramen he'd abandoned under the tree. Not really. Come on, then. Ino started walking toward the main building, and after a moment of stunned immobility, Naruto scrambled to follow. My mom packed extra onigiri. You can share. As they walked, Ino chattering about her morning classes and pointing out various spots around the academy, Naruto couldn't stop staring at her. The way her blonde hair swayed with each step, the confident set of her shoulders, the ease with which she spoke to him, as if he were normal, as if he were worth her time. Something shifted in that moment, like a gear clicking into place in a mechanism Naruto hadn't known existed. He'd spent his whole life aching for acknowledgement, for someone to see him as more than a burden or a threat. And now this girl, this wonderful, kind, beautiful girl, had not only seen him but had chosen to stand beside him. In the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that this was probably temporary, that Ino would eventually learn whatever it was that made everyone else shun him and would leave like all the others. But Naruto, with the stubborn optimism that would define him for the rest of his life, chose to ignore that voice. Instead, he focused on the present, Ino Yamanaka, walking beside him in the sunshine, offering to share her lunch and her friendship. It was the best first day of school he could have possibly imagined. The weeks following that first encounter settled into a pattern that Naruto had never experienced before. Routine punctuated by genuine human connection. Every morning, he'd arrive at the academy early, partly because he had nothing else to do and partly because he'd discovered that Ino often came early too, preferring the quiet before the other students arrived. She'd wave to him from across the yard, and they'd spend those precious few minutes talking about nothing and everything. Her family's flower shop, his dreams of becoming Hokage, the latest academy gossip that somehow always seemed to revolve around a brooding boy named Sasuke Uchiha. I don't get what everyone sees in him, Naruto had grumbled one morning, watching as a group of girls clustered around Sasuke's desk, giggling and preening. Sasuke, for his part, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, his dark eyes distant and cold. He's handsome, mysterious, and from a famous clan, Ino had listed off on her fingers, though her tone was more analytical than admiring. Also, he's really talented. Did you see him during kunai practice yesterday? Every single throw hit the center of the target. So what? Naruto had crossed his arms defensively. I can hit the target too. You hit the target twice out of 10 throws, and one of those might have been an accident, Ino had pointed out, but she'd softened the criticism with a smile. But hey, you're improving. Remember your first day? You couldn't hit the broad side of the academy building. That's not true. I hit it, just not the target part. Ino had laughed at that, and the sound had made Naruto's chest feel warm despite the teasing. He'd discovered that he liked making her laugh. Liked the way her eyes crinkled at the corners and how she'd sometimes snort unattractively before covering her mouth in embarrassment. But it wasn't just the mornings. Ino had gradually integrated Naruto into her orbit in ways both subtle and significant. She'd save him a seat during lectures, pair with him for training exercises when possible, and most importantly, her friendship served as a shield against the worst of the other students' hostility. It was a strange kind of protection. Ino was popular, well liked by most of their classmates despite her occasionally bossy tendencies. When she befriended Naruto, it created a sort of social paradox. Students who would have openly mocked or avoided him now had to moderate their behavior in her presence. They might not accept Naruto, but they wanted to stay on Ino's good side. Of course, this didn't mean everyone suddenly became friendly. Naruto still felt the weight of disapproving stares, still heard the occasional whispered slur when teachers weren't in earshot. But the overt bullying stopped, and that was something. You don't have to do this, you know, Naruto had said one day, about a month into their friendship. They were sitting on the academy roof during lunch, a spot Ino had shown him, accessible through a window in the third-floor bathroom that didn't quite close properly. Do what? Ino had asked around a mouthful of the onigiri that had become their shared lunch routine. Her mom, whether from generosity or because Ino had requested it, always packed extra food now. Hang out with me. I know it probably makes things weird with your other friends. Ino had stopped chewing and looked at him with an expression that was hard to read. Has someone said something to you? No, I see how people look at you when you're with me. Like they don't understand why you'd waste your time. First of all, Ino had said, her voice taking on that authoritative tone that always made Naruto pay attention, you're not a waste of time. Second, anyone who has a problem with who I choose to be friends with can take it up with me directly. Third, she'd hesitated, and for the first time, Naruto had seen something vulnerable in her expression. Do you not want to be friends? Because if this is your way of ditching me, it's pretty cowardly. What? No. Naruto had nearly knocked over their shared lunchbox in his haste to respond. I want to be friends. You're the only person who's ever been nice to me, besides the old man Hokage. I just don't want you to get in trouble or have people mad at you because of me. Ino's expression had softened. Naruto, I chose to be your friend. Nobody forced me. And yeah, maybe some people don't get it, but that's their problem, not mine. You're loyal, you're funny even when you don't mean to be, and you've got more determination than anyone else in our class. Plus, she'd grinned. You're honest. You know how rare that is. Most people our age are already learning how to lie and manipulate to get what they want. You just say what you think. Is that good? Naruto had asked doubtfully. Iruka-sensei says I need to think before I speak. Sometimes, Ino had admitted. But it's also refreshing. I always know where I stand with you. That conversation had cemented something between them. Naruto stopped questioning why Ino had befriended him and started simply being grateful that she had. And as the weeks turned into months, that gratitude began to evolve into something more complex. He noticed things about her that he never paid attention to with other people. The way she'd unconsciously tuck her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. How her voice got higher when she was excited about something. The small scar on her left knee from when she'd fallen off the roof of her family's shop. A story that involved a cat, a gardening trowel, and a bet with her father that she'd refused to elaborate on. He noticed that she was kind not just to him, but to everyone who deserved it. She'd help younger students who struggled with their reading. She'd stand up to bullies even when Naruto wasn't involved. She'd bring extra lunch for Choji Akimichi, a larger boy who everyone knew had an enormous appetite, without making a big deal of it. But Naruto also noticed that Ino carried her own burdens. She was the heir to the Yamanaka clan, and with that came expectations. He'd see her stay late after class, practicing jutsu until her hands shook from chakra exhaustion. He'd hear her muttering about disappointing her father, about not being good enough, about needing to be perfect because that's what a clan heir should be. One evening, after a particularly brutal training session where Ino had attempted to master a mind transfer technique far above their level, Naruto had found her sitting alone behind the academy, tears streaming down her face in frustration. I can't do it, she'd sobbed, and the sound had broken something in Naruto's chest. I've been trying for weeks, and I just can't get the chakra flow right. My dad makes it look so easy, but I can't even get the basic form down. What kind of heir am I? Naruto, who had never been good with words and even worse with emotions, had sat down beside her. For a long moment, he'd said nothing, just sat there in solidarity. Finally, he'd spoken. You know what I think? I think you're the best person in our class. Ino had looked at him, eyes red-rimmed and skeptical. You don't have to say that. I'm not just saying it. It's true. Naruto had met her gaze steadily. You're smart, you're strong, and you actually care about people. So what if you can't do one technique right now? You'll figure it out. You're Yamanaka Ino. You can do anything if you don't give up. It was a simple statement, probably naive in its optimism. But something in Naruto's absolute conviction had reached through Ino's frustration. She'd wiped her eyes, taken a shaky breath, and nodded. You really believe that? I know it, Naruto had said firmly. Just like I know I'm going to be Hokage. Some things are just true. Ino had laughed then, watery but genuine. You and your Hokage dream. You're insane. Maybe, Naruto had agreed cheerfully. But I'm going to do it anyway. And you're going to be there when it happens, probably bossing me around and telling me I'm doing it wrong. Someone has to keep you in line, Ino had said, but she'd smiled as she said it. That night, walking home through the darkening streets, Naruto had felt a new kind of warmth in his chest. It wasn't just gratitude anymore, though that was certainly part of it. It was something bigger, something that made him want to be better, stronger, more worthy of Ino's friendship and faith in him. He didn't have a name for the feeling yet. He was only 6 years old, too young to fully understand the difference between friendship and something deeper. But the seed had been planted, and like all seeds, it would grow given time and attention. 3 months into their friendship, Ino invited Naruto to visit the Yamanaka flower shop. My mom's been asking about you, Ino had said during one of their rooftop lunches. I've told her stories, and she wants to meet the boy who brings out my protective instincts, whatever that means. Naruto had nearly choked on his rice ball. Does your mom know about me? Of course she does. I tell my parents about my friends. Ino had said this as if it were the most natural thing in the world, seemingly oblivious to the fact that, for Naruto, having someone speak positively about him to their parents was revolutionary. What about your dad? Naruto had asked nervously. Inoichi Yamanaka was the head of the Yamanaka clan and a high-ranking ninja. The thought of meeting him was terrifying, Dad's curious too, but he's being weird about it. Keep asking me questions about you like he's conducting an investigation. Ino had rolled her eyes. He's protective. Ignore it. So on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Naruto had found himself standing outside the Yamanaka flower shop, palms sweating with nervousness. The shop was located in a nice part of the village, with large windows displaying elaborate flower arrangements, and a sign painted with the Yamanaka clan symbol. Through the glass, he could see rows of plants in various states of bloom, creating a rainbow of colors that seemed almost too vibrant to be real. Ino had seen him hovering outside and had opened the door with a grin. Are you going to stand out there all day, or are you coming in? The interior of the shop was even more overwhelming than the window display. The air was thick with competing scents, some sweet, some earthy, some sharp and almost medicinal. Flowers Naruto had never seen before hung from baskets or rose from pots, their petals ranging from delicate pastels to aggressive crimsons. Naruto! A woman's voice called out, warm and welcoming. Ino's mother appeared from behind a large arrangement of white lilies, wiping dirt from her hands onto her apron. She had the same blonde hair as Ino, though hers was shorter and streaked with what might have been premature gray, and her smile was genuinely kind. I've heard so much about you. I'm Kaori. Welcome to our shop. Hello Yamanaka-san, Naruto had managed, executing an awkward bow that was probably too deep for the occasion. Please, Kaori is fine. She'd studied him with eyes that were sharp despite their friendly expression, and Naruto had felt like he was being assessed in ways he couldn't quite understand. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because her smile widened. Ino-chan, why don't you show Naruto around? I need to finish this arrangement for the Nara wedding. The tour that followed had been eye-opening. Ino clearly knew every plant in the shop, rattling off names and properties with the ease of someone who'd grown up surrounded by them. She'd shown him flowers that were used in medicine, others that were ingredients for poisons, and several that existed purely for their beauty. This one is my favorite, Ino had said, stopping in front of a plant with pale purple blooms that seemed to glow in the shop's lighting. It's called a moonflower. It only blooms at night, and the petals close up during the day to protect the center. Why is it your favorite? Naruto had asked, reaching out to touch one of the delicate petals. Because it's tougher than it looks, Ino had explained. Everyone assumes it's fragile because it's pretty, but moonflowers can survive in really harsh conditions. They just need the right time to show what they can do. Naruto had looked at her then, and wondered if she was still talking about the flower or about something else entirely. They'd spent the afternoon in the shop, with Naruto helping, or more accurately, attempting to help, with basic tasks. He'd swept floors, watered plants, until Ino had stopped him because apparently you could overwater things, and learn more about flowers in one day than he'd known existed in the entire world. Inoichi had arrived late in the afternoon, and Naruto had felt his anxiety spike. But Ino's father, while intimidating in his ninja gear, had been surprisingly approachable. He'd shaken Naruto's hand, a gesture of respect that had left Naruto momentarily speechless, and had asked him polite questions about the academy. Ino tells me you want to be Hokage, Inoichi had said, his tone neutral. Yes, sir. Naruto had responded with more enthusiasm than grace. I'm going to be the best Hokage ever, believe it. Inoichi had exchanged a glance with his wife, something unspoken passing between them. Then he nodded slowly. That's a worthy ambition. The Hokage must be strong, certainly, but also wise and compassionate. It's not an easy path. I know, Naruto had said, with more seriousness than he usually displayed. But I'm going to do it anyway. I have to. Why? It had been a simple question, but Naruto had felt the weight behind it, the sense that his answer mattered more than simple curiosity. He thought about lying, about giving some grand speech about protecting the village or carrying on the will of fire. But Ino had said he was honest, and her parents deserved honesty too. Because right now, most people in this village look at me like I'm a monster, Naruto had said quietly. They don't see me, they see something else. But the Hokage is someone everyone has to acknowledge and respect. If I become Hokage, they'll have to see me as a person. They'll have to see that I was worth something all along. The silence that had followed had been heavy. Kaori looked sad. Inoichi's expression had been harder to read, but something like respect had flickered in his eyes. "That's honest," Inoichi had finally said. "Painful, but honest. And you're right, becoming Hokage would force acknowledgement. But be careful, Naruto. Seeking external validation is a dangerous path. The strongest ninja are those who know their own worth regardless of others' opinions." "Dad," Ino had interjected, her voice carrying a warning. "It's okay," Naruto had said. "He's right. I know I shouldn't need everyone to like me. But..." He'd struggled to find the words. "But it's hard when everyone treats you like you're nothing. When people cross the street to avoid you, or parents pull their kids away, or teachers ignore you even when you're raising your hand. It's hard to believe you're worth something when the whole world tells you you're not." Kaori had stepped forward and, to Naruto's shock, had pulled him into a brief hug. "You're worth something," she'd said firmly. "Our daughter sees it. We see it. And someday, everyone else will too." That moment had been transformative for Naruto. Not just because of the unexpected kindness, though that alone would have been significant, but because of what it represented. The Yamanaka family, knowing whatever it was that made others shun him, had chosen to see him as a person anyway. They'd welcomed him into their shop, into their space, and had treated him with a dignity he'd rarely experienced. As he'd walked home that evening, a small package of flower seeds in his pocket, a gift from Kaori, who'd insisted he try growing something in his apartment, Naruto had felt something shift in his understanding of the world. Maybe not everyone would hate him forever. Maybe there were people who could look past whatever secret burden he carried. And maybe, just maybe, Ino Yamanaka was the most important of those people. The Academy's social hierarchy was a complex thing, built on clan prestige, talent, and the subtle politics that even 6- and 7-year-olds instinctively understood. At the top sat Sasuke Uchiha, brooding and talented, heir to one of the village's most prestigious clans. Around him orbited various hangers-on, girls who giggled and competed for his attention, boys who either wanted to befriend him or defeat him, and everyone else who simply acknowledged his inherent superiority. Then there were the other clan heirs, Shikamaru Nara, lazy but brilliant, Choji Akimichi, kind-hearted and strong, Kiba Inuzuka, loud and competitive, Shino Aburame, quiet and methodical, Hinata Hyuga, shy and overlooked despite her prestigious lineage. Each occupied their own niche in the social structure. Ino existed in a unique position. She was popular without being part of Sasuke's immediate orbit, friendly without being a pushover, and assertive enough that most students gave her a wide berth when she was in a mood. Her friendship with Sakura Haruno, a civilian-born girl with good grades and a massive crush on Sasuke, had been the talk of their year, a testament to Ino's ability to bridge social divides. And then there was Naruto, who existed outside the hierarchy entirely. He wasn't at the bottom. That would have required acknowledgement. He was simply a part, a separate category that most students preferred to ignore. Ino's friendship with him had created ripples in the social order that were becoming more apparent as the months passed. "I don't understand why you hang out with him," Sakura had said one day during kunoichi training, a class where the girls learned separate skills from the boys. They were supposed to be practicing flower arrangement, a traditional skill that also taught patience and precision, but most of the girls were gossiping instead. Ino had looked up from her arrangement, a particularly challenging one involving 3 different types of roses. "Who, Naruto? Who else?" Sakura had wrinkled her nose. "He's so loud and annoying. And he's always causing trouble in class." "He's enthusiastic," Ino had corrected. "And he causes trouble because Irika-sensei ignores him half the time and he needs attention." "It's not that complicated. But why does it have to be your attention?" Sakura had pressed. She'd been getting more insistent about this topic lately, and Ino was beginning to find it irritating. "We barely hang out anymore because you're always with him." This was partially true. Ino's friendship with Sakura had cooled somewhat since Naruto entered the picture, though not entirely because of him. Sakura's obsession with Sasuke had become increasingly tiresome, dominating every conversation with speculation about what he thought or did, or might possibly think about potentially doing. "You barely hang out with me anymore because you're too busy staring at Sasuke," Ino had countered, more sharply than she'd intended. "At least Naruto actually talks to me instead of ignoring me while he broods dramatically in a corner." Sakura's face had flushed. That's not fair. Sasuke is amazing. He's the top student in our class, because he practices constantly and has access to clan training that most of us don't, Ino had interrupted. I'm not saying he isn't talented, but you act like he's some kind of god instead of just another student. You're just jealous because he's never looked at you. I'm not jealous of being ignored by an emotionally unavailable 7-year-old, Ino had said flatly. Believe it or not, there are more important things than which boy pays attention to you. The argument had escalated from there, with Sakura ultimately storming off and leaving her flower arrangement half-finished. Ino had felt bad about it. Sakura had been her friend first, after all, but she'd also been frustrated by the constant questioning of her choices. Why did everyone need an explanation for why she was friends with Naruto? Why wasn't because I like him enough of a reason? The truth, which Ino was only beginning to recognize herself, was that Naruto brought something into her life that had been missing. He was genuine in a way few people were. When she accomplished something, his praise was sincere and unqualified by jealousy or competition. When she struggled, he offered support without judgment or expectation of reciprocation. More than that, he needed her in a way that was both humbling and empowering. Ino had been raised to be strong, to be a leader, to live up to her clan's expectations. But strength without purpose felt hollow. Naruto gave her purpose, not because he was weak or helpless, but because he was alone and she could choose not to let him be alone anymore. There was something else too, something Ino didn't have words for yet. When Naruto smiled at her, genuinely pleased to see her, she felt something warm in her chest. When he defended her to other students, which happened more often than he probably realized, she felt proud. And when he talked about his dreams with that unshakable conviction, she felt inspired to dream bigger herself. These feelings were confusing and new, made more complicated by their youth. At 7 years old, Ino understood friendship and family and clan loyalty. Romance was something that existed in her mother's novels and in the giggling speculation of older girls. It wasn't something she expected to feel herself, not yet. But there was definitely something there, some seed of feeling that went beyond simple friendship, even if she couldn't name it or fully understand it. Meanwhile, Naruto was experiencing his own confusion. He never had a friend before Ino, so he had no baseline for comparison. He didn't know if the way he felt about her, the way his heart beat faster when she laughed, the way he thought about her during training and dreamed about her at night, the way he wanted to be better and stronger and more impressive whenever she was watching, was normal friendship or something else. What he did know was that Ino had become the center of his world in a way that even his Hokage dream couldn't quite match. Being Hokage was his goal, his ultimate ambition, but Ino was his reason for wanting to reach that goal. He wanted to become someone worthy of standing beside her, someone she could be proud to call her friend. This manifested in ways both helpful and problematic. On the helpful side, Naruto's motivation to improve skyrocketed. He stayed later after class to practice kunai throwing, waking up earlier to run through basic taijutsu katas. His grades improved marginally. He'd never be an academic star, but he went from failing most written tests to occasionally passing them. Iruka noticed the change and, despite his complicated feelings about Naruto, felt compelled to encourage it. You've been working harder lately, the teacher had observed one afternoon, watching Naruto practice his clone jutsu for the 10th time. The results were still pathetic, lopsided, discolored shadows that barely resembled human forms. But the effort was undeniable. I have to get stronger, Naruto panted, sweat dripping down his face. I made a promise. To whom? Iruka had asked, curious despite himself. To myself. And to Ino. Naruto had grinned, that bright infectious smile that made it hard to stay distant. She believes I can be Hokage. I gotta prove she's right. Iruka had felt something twist in his chest, admiration mixed with concern. He knew what Naruto was, what burden the boy carried, and he knew the village would never fully accept him. Watching Naruto work so hard for a goal that might be forever out of reach was both inspiring and heartbreaking. But on the problematic side, Naruto's focus on Ino led to some unfortunate incidents. There was the time he'd challenged 3 older students to a fight because they'd made fun of Ino's purple outfit. He'd lost badly, earning himself a black eye and a lecture from Iruka about picking his battles. There was the time he tried to pick flowers from the Hokage monument to give to Ino, not realizing that the specific flowers were protected and that climbing on the monument was forbidden. That had earned him community service and an actual meeting with the Hokage, who'd been more amused than angry but had still been assigned punishment. And there was the memorable incident when Naruto had attempted to make Ino a birthday present, a painted kunai holster, but had accidentally used the wrong kind of paint, resulting in a chemical reaction that had stained Ino's leg purple for 3 days and gotten them both detention. "You're an idiot," Ino had said, but she'd been laughing as she said it, examining her purple-stained shin with more amusement than anger. A well-meaning idiot, but still an idiot. "I'm sorry," Naruto had mumbled, genuinely distressed. "I wanted to make you something special, and I ruined it." "You didn't ruin it," Ino had corrected. "The holster is actually really nice, and purple is my color anyway. So now I'm just extra purple for a few days. Could be worse." "You're not mad?" "I'm more mad that you didn't test the paint first," Ino had said. "That's basic crafting knowledge, Naruto." But the thought was sweet, even if the execution was disastrous. These incidents, rather than driving them apart, seemed to strengthen their bond. Ino learned to anticipate Naruto's enthusiastic but poorly planned gestures, while Naruto learned to accept Ino's honest critiques without taking them as rejection. They developed their own language of sorts, inside jokes, shared references, and understanding that didn't require words. Naruto could tell when Ino was having a bad day just by the set of her shoulders. Ino could predict when Naruto was about to do something impulsive by a certain look in his eyes. Other students noticed, and reactions varied. Shikamaru, who sat near Naruto in class, had observed the dynamic with his usual lazy attention. "Troublesome," he muttered one day when Naruto had completely lost focus during a lecture because Ino was practicing hand signs across the room. "You've got it bad." "Got what bad?" Naruto had asked, genuinely confused. "Nothing. Forget it." Shikamaru had slouched lower in his seat. "Just don't be stupid about it." Choji, Shikamaru's constant companion, had been more accepting. He'd started joining Naruto and Ino for lunch occasionally, appreciating that Ino always had extra food and never made him feel bad about how much he ate. Through Choji came Shikamaru, reluctant but gradually warming to the group dynamic. Kiba Inuzuka, on the other hand, had developed an antagonistic relationship with Naruto that seemed to revolve partly around Ino's attention. Kiba was loud, competitive, and couldn't stand that Naruto, who he viewed as talentless and annoying, had befriended one of the most popular girls in their class. "I don't see what she sees in you," Kiba sneered one day after class. His puppy, Akamaru, had barked from his perch on Kiba's head, as if agreeing. "You can't do anything right." "I can do lots of things right," Naruto had protested. "I'm getting better at taijutsu, and my kunai throwing is improving and..." "You're dead last in everything that matters," Kiba had interrupted. "The only reason Ino hangs out with you is because she feels sorry for you." The words had struck deep, hitting on Naruto's core insecurity. What if that was true? What if Ino's friendship was just pity, an extension of that first moment when she'd helped him off the ground? What if she didn't actually see potential in him but was just too kind to abandon him? Naruto had gone home that day and stared at his reflection in the cracked mirror of his bathroom. He looked at his whisker marks, his too bright blonde hair, his eyes that everyone said were too intense. He tried to see what others saw when they looked at him, but all he could see was himself. A kid who wanted to belong, who wanted to matter, who wanted to be acknowledged. The next day, he'd been quiet during their morning meetup, and Ino had noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she'd asked, sitting beside him on their usual bench outside the academy. "Nothing," Naruto had lied. "Naruto." Ino had used her serious voice, the one that meant she wouldn't accept deflection. "Tell me." So he had, haltingly, explained what Kiba had said and the doubts it had raised. He'd expected Ino to reassure him, to tell him it wasn't true, to maybe get angry at Kiba. Instead, she'd been quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she turned to face him fully. "Do you think I'm the kind of person who does things out of pity?" she'd asked. "No, but do you think I'm the kind of person who would waste months of my time on someone I didn't actually want to be around?" "Well, no." "Do you think I'm the kind of person who's too weak or too nice to tell someone when I don't want to be their friend anymore?" "No," Naruto had admitted, because he'd seen Ino cut ties with people who disappointed her. She was kind but not a pushover. Then why would you believe Kiba over your own experience? Ino had demanded. I'm your friend because I choose to be, not because I feel sorry for you, not because I'm too nice to leave, but because I genuinely like spending time with you. You're hardworking, loyal, funny, and you make me want to be better too. So when someone tells you that my friendship is fake, they're calling me a liar. And I don't appreciate that. She'd stood up then, brushing off her skirt with sharp, angry movements. Now come on. We're going to find Kiba, and you're going to challenge him to a spar. And then you're going to lose, because let's be honest, he's better than you right now. But you're going to get back up every single time he knocks you down, and you're going to show him that you don't give up. Because that's who you are, Naruto. You don't give up. Naruto had felt something swell in his chest. Pride, determination, and something even warmer. Ino believed in him. Not in some abstract future version of him, but in who he was right now, flaws and all. The spar with Kiba had gone exactly as Ino predicted. Naruto lost decisively, taking hit after hit, getting knocked down again and again. But each time, he'd gotten back up, and by the end, even Kiba had looked grudgingly impressed. You're stubborn, Kiba had said afterward, not quite an apology but not hostile either. I'll give you that. Told you, Ino had said, appearing at Naruto's side to help him to the nurse's office. Some people just need to see it for themselves. That night, nursing his bruises in his small apartment, Naruto had realized something important. The feeling in his chest when Ino defended him, when she challenged him to be better, when she simply chose to be in his life, that feeling was more than friendship. He didn't have the vocabulary to express it yet, didn't understand the full implications, but he knew with absolute certainty that Ino Yamanaka was the most important person in his world, and he knew that he would do anything, become anything, to be worthy of that friendship and whatever it might grow into. Winter came to Konoha with unusual severity that year, blanketing the village in snow and dropping temperatures to levels that made training outdoors nearly unbearable. The academy adjusted schedules, moving more lessons inside and shortening outdoor practical sessions. For Naruto, winter brought a different kind of chill, a reminder of the isolation that Ino's friendship had helped him forget. His apartment, which had always been inadequate, became almost uninhabitable. The heating barely worked, and the single blanket he owned was threadbare and insufficient. He'd wake up with frost on the inside of his windows and his breath visible in the air. Food was scarce too. His monthly stipend from the Hokage was enough for basic survival, but not much more, and in winter, prices rose while his budget stayed the same. He tried to hide it from Ino. He'd show up to the academy each day with his characteristic energy, smile plastered on his face, pretending everything was fine. But Ino, observant as always, began to notice the small signs. The way Naruto's hands shook slightly during morning practice, not from cold but from hunger. The way his clothes, while clean, were obviously too thin for winter weather. The way he'd devour lunch with an urgency that suggested it might be his only meal of the day. Naruto, she'd said one particularly cold morning, are you okay? You look pale. I'm fine. Naruto had insisted, summoning up enthusiasm he didn't quite feel. Just excited for today's training, believe it. But Ino wasn't fooled. That evening, she'd cornered him after class, refusing to let him leave until he talked to her. What's really going on? She'd demanded. And don't tell me anything, because I'm not stupid. Naruto had tried to deflect, to change the subject, but Ino had been relentless. Finally, worn down by her persistence and his own exhaustion, he'd admitted the truth, or at least part of it. My apartment is just really cold, he'd said quietly. And money's been tight. But it's fine, really. I've dealt with worse. That's not fine, Ino had said, her voice sharp with anger that Naruto instinctively knew wasn't directed at him. Have you told anyone? Does the Hokage know? He gives me money every month, Naruto had defended. It's not his fault I'm bad at budgeting. You're 7 years old. You shouldn't have to budget. Ino had been practically vibrating with frustration. Where are your parents? Who's supposed to be taking care of you? And there it was, the question Naruto had been dreading. He'd known Ino would eventually ask about his family, about why he lived alone, about the circumstances that made him so different from the other children. "I don't have parents," Naruto had said, the words emerging flat and practiced. "They died when I was born. And I don't have any other family, so I live by myself. It's just how it is." Ino's expression had shifted through several emotions: shock, sympathy, anger, determination. "That's not how it should be," she'd said firmly. "Come on, where are we going?" "To my house. You're having dinner with us, and you're going to tell my parents what's happening." "Ino, no!" Naruto had protested, panic rising in his chest. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, you're a child who needs help." Ino had grabbed his hand, the first time she'd done so deliberately, and the touch had sent warmth shooting up Naruto's arm despite the cold. "Now stop arguing and come with me." The walk to the Yamanaka house had been tense. Naruto had felt his anxiety building with each step, terrified that this would be the moment when Ino's family realized he wasn't worth the trouble, when they'd tell Ino to stop associating with him. But when they'd arrived and Ino had explained the situation to her parents, their reaction had surprised him. Kaori had immediately pulled Naruto into the kitchen and started preparing food, muttering about village policies and bureaucratic nonsense with increasing agitation. Inoichi had excused himself to make what he'd called an important phone call, his grave expression. Naruto had sat at the Yamanaka family dinner table, overwhelmed by the normalcy of it all. Ino had sat beside him, occasionally reaching over to put more food on his plate when she thought he wasn't eating enough. The conversation had flowed around him, talk of clan business, village gossip, Ino's training progress, and for the first time in his life, Naruto had felt what it might be like to be part of a family. Inoichi had returned after about 30 minutes, his expression slightly lighter. "I've spoken with some people," he'd said, addressing Naruto directly. "Your situation is going to improve. I can't fix everything overnight, but I've made sure your stipend will increase and that someone will check on your apartment's heating situation." "You didn't have to do that," Naruto had whispered, overwhelmed. "Yes, I did," Inoichi had said firmly. "You're my daughter's friend, which makes you important to our family. And more than that, you're a child of this village, and you deserve better than what you've been receiving." That conversation had opened new doors but had also raised questions. Over the following weeks, as Naruto's living situation slowly improved, he'd become acutely aware of the secrets that surrounded him. He'd always known there was something different about him, something that made adults treat him with fear or disgust. But he'd assumed it was just because he was an orphan, or because he was loud and troublesome, or because of some flaw in his personality. Now, watching how carefully people stepped around the topic of his past, how Inoichi would sometimes look at him with something like pity mixed with respect, how even Ino's probing questions about his family were met with vague, unsatisfying answers, Naruto began to suspect the truth was more complicated. One night, unable to sleep despite his now functioning heater, Naruto had climbed up to the Hokage monument, a place he often went when he needed to think. The giant carved faces of the previous Hokages looked out over the village, stone sentinels watching over their people. Naruto had sat beneath the fourth Hokage's face, his personal favorite. There was something about the fourth that resonated with him, maybe the determined expression, maybe the stories of his heroism, maybe just the way people spoke about him with genuine admiration rather than the formal respect they gave the other Hokages. "I wish you were still alive," Naruto had said to the stone face. "Everyone says you were amazing. Maybe if you were still Hokage, things would be different. Maybe you'd know why everyone treats me like I'm a monster." The stone, predictably, hadn't answered. But sitting there in the cold, looking out over the village lights, Naruto had made a decision. He didn't need to know what secret he carried. What mattered was proving that whatever it was, it didn't define him. He would become Hokage, he would make Ino proud, and he would show everyone that Uzumaki Naruto was more than whatever burden had been placed on him. The next morning, Ino had found him at the academy early, as usual. She'd taken one look at his face, determined and set, and had smiled. "You've got that look again," she'd observed. "The one that means you're about to do something either really brave or really stupid. Why can't it be both?" Naruto had asked with a grin. "With you, it usually is." Ino had sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Whatever you're planning, just remember you don't have to do it alone. That's what friends are for. I know, Naruto had said, and meant it. Thank you, Ino. For everything. For being my friend, for caring about me, for not giving up even when I'm being difficult. You're not difficult, Ino had said, then reconsidered. Okay, you're a little difficult. But you're worth it. Those 3 words, you're worth it, had echoed in Naruto's mind for days afterward. Coming from Ino, they felt like truth rather than platitude. She thought he was worth the effort, worth the friendship, worth the complications that came with associating with him. And if Ino Yamanaka, with her intelligence and strength and unwavering confidence, thought he was worth it, then maybe he actually was. The realization had crystallized something for Naruto. The feeling in his chest when he looked at Ino, when he thought about her, when he imagined a future where she was still beside him, it was more than gratitude. It was more than friendship. It was something bigger and more terrifying and more wonderful. At 7 years old, Naruto didn't have the emotional vocabulary to call it love. But he knew, with the absolute certainty that would characterize him for his entire life, that Ino Yamanaka was his person, the one who saw him when everyone else looked away. The one who believed in him when he struggled to believe in himself. The one who made him want to be better, do better, reach higher. And someday, when he was stronger and more worthy, when he'd proven himself to the village and to himself, he would tell her exactly how important she was to him. But for now, he would work. He would train. He would struggle and fail and get back up and try again. Because that's what Ino had taught him to do, and because anything worth having was worth fighting for. The transition from winter to spring brought new energy to the academy. Students who'd spent months cooped up indoors were eager to resume outdoor training, and the warming weather meant longer days and more opportunities for practice. For Naruto and Ino, now 8 years old and entering their 2nd year at the academy, the changing seasons marked a shift in their relationship. They'd moved beyond the simple friendship of their first year into something deeper and more complex. A bond that both sustained and challenged them. Naruto's improvement as a student had been gradual but undeniable. He would never be top of the class. That position was locked in by Sasuke Uchiha, with various clan heirs competing for 2nd and 3rd place. But he'd climbed from absolute last to somewhere in the middle, an achievement that surprised everyone except Ino. I told you that you could do it, she'd said when their test scores were posted, showing Naruto had actually passed his written exam on basic shinobi history. You just needed to apply yourself. I had a good teacher, Naruto replied, grinning. Ino had been tutoring him most evenings, either at the flower shop or in her family's home, patiently explaining concepts that Irika rushed through in class. Their study sessions had become routine, a rhythm of work and conversation that revealed new dimensions to both of them. Naruto had discovered that Ino, for all her confidence, struggled with pressure from her father and clan elders. The expectations placed on her as the Yamanaka heir were immense, and she sometimes buckled under their weight. Dad says I need to master the mind-body switch technique by the end of the year, Ino had confessed one evening, frustration evident in every line of her body. But I can barely hold the jutsu for 5 seconds, and even then, my control is sloppy. What if I'm not good enough? What if I let down the whole clan? You won't, Naruto had said with absolute conviction. You're the smartest and most determined person I know. You'll figure it out. But what if I don't? Ino's voice had been small, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. What if I'm just not talented enough? Naruto had thought about that, about the difference between talent and determination. He knew he wasn't naturally talented. Every skill he'd acquired had come through repetition and failure, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. But he also knew that determination could overcome a lot of limitations. Then you'll work harder than everyone else until you are talented enough, he'd said. That's what I do. I'm not naturally good at anything, but I don't let that stop me. And you're way better than me to start with. So if I can improve, you definitely can. Ino had looked at him then with an expression that was hard to read. Gratitude mixed with something softer, more complicated. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise, Naruto had protested. I'm just stubborn. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. These moments of vulnerability, where both let down their guards and admitted their fears, had forged their friendship into something unbreakable. They knew each other's weaknesses and insecurities, but rather than exploiting them, they protected each other's tender places. Ino defended Naruto from the subtle cruelties of other students who still viewed him as an outcast. Naruto boosted Ino when the pressure of her clan responsibilities became overwhelming. Together, they were stronger than either was alone. But growth wasn't always smooth or painless. There had been an incident during taijutsu training when Naruto, frustrated by his continued inability to land a hit on Sasuke during sparring, lashed out with angry words. "What's the point?" he'd shouted, loud enough for the whole class to hear. "No matter how hard I train, I'll never be as good as the precious Uchiha." Ino had pulled him aside afterward, away from the other students' curious stares. "That's not you," she'd said sharply. "Self-pity doesn't suit you, Naruto." "I'm not being self-pitying," Naruto protested. "I'm being realistic. Sasuke has Sharingan, clan training, and natural talent. What do I have? You have determination. You have loyalty. You have the ability to make people believe in you." Ino had grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Do you think I became your friend because I thought you'd be the strongest ninja ever? I became your friend because you never gave up, even when everyone else had given up on you. Don't lose that now just because someone's currently better at taijutsu." The reprimand had stung, but it had also been necessary. Naruto had apologized, to Ino and to himself, and had redoubled his efforts with renewed focus. He'd never beat Sasuke in a straight fight. Not yet. But that didn't mean he couldn't improve his own skills. Similarly, Naruto had to call Ino out when her competitive nature crossed into cruelty. There'd been a girl in their class, a shy civilian-born student named Ami, who had made the mistake of commenting that she thought Sasuke was handsome. Ino, perhaps feeling territorial over her social position or just having a bad day, had publicly mocked the girl's crush with cutting precision. Naruto had watched the incident, seen Ami's face crumble, and had felt his stomach turn. After class, he'd confronted Ino. "That was mean," he'd said bluntly. "You made her feel small for no reason." She was being ridiculous, Ino had defended, but her voice lacked conviction. "Everyone has a crush on Sasuke. It's annoying. So what? That doesn't mean you get to make her feel bad about it." Naruto had crossed his arms. "You're better than that, Ino. You're the person who defended me when everyone else was being cruel. Don't become the person who needs defending against." Ino had been quiet for a long moment, and Naruto had seen the moment when his words struck home. Her expression had shifted from defensive to ashamed. "You're right," she'd admitted quietly. "I was having a bad day, and I took it out on someone who didn't deserve it. I'll apologize to her tomorrow." And she had, publicly and genuinely, earned surprised respect from Ami and from other students who'd witnessed the original incident. It had been a moment of growth for Ino, a recognition that power, social, physical, or otherwise, came with responsibility. These challenges and resolutions, disagreements and reconciliations, had deepened their bond. They were learning not just to be friends but to be better people because of their friendship. They challenged each other's worst impulses while encouraging their best ones. As spring progressed into summer, their dynamic became even more established in the academy's social structure. Naruto was no longer completely isolated. Ino's friendship had created a buffer zone of grudging acceptance. Students might not seek him out, but they no longer actively avoided him either. A small group had even formed around them, Shikamaru and Choji, drawn by Ino's friendship and gradually warming to Naruto's enthusiasm, occasionally Kiba, who'd developed a competitive but not hostile relationship with Naruto after their previous conflicts, and sometimes even Hinata Hyuga, the shy Hyuga heiress who seemed to watch their group with wistful interest. Hinata was an interesting case. She'd been in their class since the beginning, but Naruto had barely noticed her. She was quiet, almost invisible despite her prestigious lineage, and she had a tendency to faint or stutter when put on the spot. But Ino had noticed how Hinata watched Naruto, and had started including her in their lunch group. "She needs friends," Ino had explained when Naruto asked why. "And you of all people should understand what it's like to be isolated." Naruto had felt appropriately chastened and had made efforts to be friendly to Hinata. She'd responded with stammering gratitude and had occasionally joined their rooftop lunches, though she rarely spoke and seemed content to simply be included. It was during one of these lunches, with Ino, Naruto, Hinata, Shikamaru, and Choji all sprawled across the roof, then Naruto had a realization about how much his life had changed. A year and a half ago, he'd been completely alone, eating cold ramen by himself while watching other kids play. Now he was surrounded by people. Maybe not a huge group, maybe not the most popular kids in school, but genuine friends who chose to spend time with him. And at the center of it all was Ino, laughing at something Shikamaru had said, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, her presence the anchor that kept their disparate group together. Naruto had felt that familiar warmth in his chest, the feeling that had been growing stronger with each passing month. He still didn't have a name for it, but he knew with absolute certainty that Ino Yamanaka was the most important person in his world. "What are you staring at?" Ino had asked, catching his gaze. "Nothing," Naruto had said quickly, feeling his cheeks heat. "Just thinking." "Dangerous hobby for you," Ino had teased, but her smile had been fond. Later, after the others had left, and it was just the two of them on the roof, Ino had asked him seriously, "Are you happy, Naruto?" The question had surprised him. "Yeah, why? I know things are still hard sometimes. I know people still treat you badly. I wanted to make sure that, despite everything, you're okay." Naruto had considered the question carefully. His life was far from perfect. He still lived alone in a small apartment. He still faced prejudice and hostility from parts of the village. He still struggled with his studies and his training, still felt the weight of the secret that everyone knew but him. But he also has friends now. He had Ino, who believed in him and challenged him and made him want to be better. He had a purpose, a goal, a reason to wake up each morning and push forward. "I'm happy," he'd said, and realized it was true. "I'm happier than I've ever been." Ino's smile had been radiant. "Good. Because you deserve to be happy, Naruto. Don't let anyone tell you differently." As summer deepened and the academy year drew toward its close, Naruto found himself thinking more about the future. He was 8 years old now, no longer the confused 6-year-old who'd stumbled through his first day of class. He had friends, he had skills, limited but improving, and he had a clear goal. But more than anything, he had Ino. And as he watched her master the mind-body switch technique after months of dedicated practice, as he saw her father's proud expression and heard her excited recounting of finally succeeding, Naruto felt something crystallize in his heart. He wanted to be worthy of her. Not just as a friend, though that would have been enough, but as something more, something he was starting to understand even if he couldn't articulate it yet. He wanted to be someone Ino could rely on, could be proud of, could trust absolutely. He wanted to stand beside her not as the kid she'd rescued from bullies but as an equal, a partner, someone strong enough to support her the way she supported him. It was an ambitious goal, maybe as ambitious as becoming Hokage. But Naruto had never shied away from ambitious goals. As he walked home that evening, the summer sun setting over the village in streaks of orange and gold, Naruto made a promise to himself. He would work harder than ever before. He would master the skills that eluded him. He would prove to everyone, to the village, to his teachers, to himself, that he was more than the burden they saw when they looked at him. And maybe, someday, he would be brave enough to tell Ino exactly how much she meant to him. But for now, he was content to be her friend, her supporter, her constant companion in the journey toward their dreams. It was enough. And it was more than he'd ever dared hope for. The summer festival was one of Konoha's biggest celebrations, a time when the entire village came together to honor their fallen shinobi and celebrate their peaceful present. The streets are filled with food stalls, game booths, and performances. Fireworks lit up the night sky in brilliant displays, and for one night, the usual social barriers that divided the village seemed to soften. For Naruto, the festival had always been a lonely time. He'd wander the streets alone, watching families laugh together, watching couples hold hands, watching groups of friends enjoy the festivities while he existed in his bubble of isolation. He'd buy cheap festival food with his limited money and find a quiet spot to watch the fireworks, pretending he didn't mind being alone. But this year was different. "You're coming with us," Ino had declared a week before the festival. "No arguments." "Us?" Naruto had asked. "My family. We go to the festival every year, and this year you're coming too." Ino had crossed her arms in that way that meant the decision was final. "Mom's already planning what food to bring, And Dad's teaching you some basic festival games so you don't embarrass yourself. I wouldn't embarrass myself, Naruto had protested weakly. You tried to win a goldfish last year by grabbing it with your hands instead of using the scoop, Ino had said flatly. That textbook is embarrassing. Naruto couldn't really argue with that. The week leading up to the festival had been filled with unusual excitement. Kaori had taken Naruto shopping for festival clothes. A simple but well-made yukata in dark blue that made his blonde hair look even brighter. Inoichi had indeed taught him the rules of various festival games, along with tips on how to actually win them. And Ino had been in high spirits, chattering about the festival's attractions and planning their route through the festivities. When the night finally arrived, Naruto had met the Yamanaka family at their home, feeling awkward and out of place in his new yukata. But Kaori had fussed over him, adjusting his collar and complimenting how handsome he looked, while Inoichi had simply nodded approvingly. And Ino had taken Naruto's breath away. She wore a pale purple yukata with a pattern of white flowers, her long blonde hair styled up with decorative pins. She looked older than her 8 years, elegant and beautiful in a way that made Naruto's heart beat faster. You look really nice, he managed to stammer out. Ino had blushed, actually blushed, and Naruto had felt an absurd surge of pride at causing that reaction. Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself. The festival had been everything Naruto had watched from afar in previous years, but experiencing it was entirely different. He'd played games with Ino, both of them laughing when his attempts at the ring toss went hilariously wrong. They shared festival food, takoyaki, yakisoba and candy apples. They'd watched street performances and wandered through crowds of celebrating villagers. For the first time in his life, Naruto felt like he belonged. With the Yamanaka family flanking them, other villagers treated him differently. They saw him as part of a group rather than as an isolated oddity. Shopkeepers who usually watched him with suspicion smiled and handed him festival prizes. Other children from the academy called out greetings instead of avoiding him. It was intoxicating, this taste of normalcy, of acceptance. And at the center of it all was Ino, her hand occasionally brushing against his as they walked, her laugh ringing out at his jokes, her presence making everything brighter. As evening deepened into night, Inoichi and Kaori had given them permission to wander on their own with instructions to meet at the fireworks viewing area by 10 o'clock. Suddenly, it was just Naruto and Ino, alone in the festival crowd. Where do you want to go? Ino had asked, and something in her voice had sounded different, nervous, maybe, or excited in a way that went beyond the festival's atmosphere. Anywhere, Naruto had said honestly. As long as you're there. The words had slipped out before he could think better of them, more revealing than he'd intended. Ino had looked at him with wide eyes, surprise and something else flickering across her face. Naruto, she'd started, but then Shikamaru's voice had interrupted. Ino! Naruto! The lazy genius had appeared with Choji at his side, both in their own festival clothing. We've been looking for you. Choji wants to try the barbecue stand, and I figured you'd want to join. The moment had broken. Whatever Ino had been about to say was left unspoken. They joined Shikamaru and Choji, and soon Kiba and Hinata had found them too, and suddenly their group was 6 strong, moving through the festival together. It should have been perfect. And in many ways it was, friends enjoying the festival, laughing and competing at games and eating too much food. But Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been interrupted. That Ino had been about to say something significant before Shikamaru's arrival. As the time for fireworks approached, their group had made their way to the viewing area, a hill overlooking the village where crowds gathered to watch the display. The Yamanaka family had saved them a spot, and they'd all settled in, arranging themselves on blankets spread across the grass. Through some unspoken arrangement, Naruto and Ino ended up sitting slightly apart from the others, close enough to be part of the group but with a bubble of semi-privacy around them. The first firework launched with a whistle and exploded in a burst of red and gold, illuminating the night sky. The crowd gasped in appreciation, and more fireworks followed, blues and greens and silvers, each more elaborate than the last. Naruto watched, mesmerized, but he found his attention drifting from the sky to Ino beside him. The fireworks painted her face in alternating colors, and she looked enchanted by the display, her expression open and joyful in a way she sometimes guarded during regular days. It's beautiful, Ino had whispered, her eyes on the sky. Yeah, Naruto had agreed, his eyes on her, and maybe Ino had sensed his gaze because she turned to look at him, and suddenly they were staring at each other instead of the fireworks, the explosions of light above reflected in both their eyes. Naruto, Ino had said softly, "There's something I need to tell you." Naruto's heart had started racing, though he couldn't have said why. "What is it?" But before Ino could respond, a voice had cut through the air, sharp and ugly. "Well, if it isn't the demon brat." Naruto had turned to see 3 older boys, maybe 12 or 13, standing nearby. He didn't recognize them specifically, but he recognized the type, village kids who'd grown up hearing whispers about him, who'd absorbed their parents' prejudices and made them their own. "What did you say?" Ino had stood immediately, her voice dangerous. "You heard me," the apparent leader sneered. "Everyone knows what he is. Can't believe they let him come to the festival. It's disrespectful to the honored dead." Naruto had felt ice flood his veins. The honored dead. The phrase clicked something into place, a connection he'd been too young or too naive to make before. The festival honored fallen shinobi. Whatever he was, whatever secret he carried, it was connected to the village's loss. "You need to leave," Ino had said, stepping between Naruto and the older boys. "Now, or what? Are you going to defend the demon?" The boy laughed. "Everyone knows it's his fault the 4th Hokage is dead. If it wasn't for him." The boy hadn't finished the sentence because Inoichi had appeared, his presence sudden and intimidating. The Yamanaka clan head had fixed the teenagers with a look that could have frozen fire. "I believe you boys were just leaving," Inoichi had said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. "And you'll remember that spreading lies about Konoha citizens is a serious offense. I'd hate to have to speak with your parents about your behavior." The boys had paled and scattered, disappearing into the crowd with muttered apologies. But the damage had been done. Naruto had sat frozen, his mind racing. The 4th Hokage's death. Him. A connection he'd never known about, never even suspected. The 4th had died 8 years ago, on the night Naruto was born, and somehow, everyone blamed Naruto for it. "Naruto," Ino had said, kneeling beside him, her hands on his shoulders. "Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about." "But they do," Naruto had heard himself say, his voice distant. "Don't they? Everyone knows something about me that I don't. Something about the 4th Hokage and why I'm what I am." Inoichi and Kaori had exchanged a look, and Naruto had seen the confirmation in their expressions. They knew. They'd always known. "I think," Inoichi had said carefully, "that this is a conversation for another time and place. For now, let's just focus on the festival." But the festival had lost its magic. Naruto had watched the remaining fireworks mechanically, his mind churning with implications and questions. Ino had stayed close to him, her hand finding his and squeezing gently, offering comfort he barely registered. Later, after they'd walked him home, an unprecedented escort that suggested the Yamanaka parents were worried about him, Naruto had sat in his apartment, staring at nothing. The 4th Hokage had been his hero, the shinobi he'd most admired and wanted to emulate. And somehow, Naruto was connected to his death. The thought was almost too much to process. A knock on his door had startled him from his spiral. Opening it, he'd found Ino standing there, still in her festival yukata. "I snuck out," she'd said without preamble. "My parents think I'm asleep. Can I come in?" Naruto had stepped aside numbly, and Ino had entered his small apartment, taking in the sparse furnishings and basic amenities with eyes that missed nothing but judged nothing. They'd sat on his bed, the only real furniture beyond a small table and single chair, and for a long moment either had spoken. "I'm sorry," Ino had finally said. "I'm sorry that those boys ruined the festival. I'm sorry that people treat you the way they do. And I'm sorry that there are things about your past that you don't know." "Do you know?" Naruto had asked quietly. "About whatever I am? Why does everyone blame me for the 4th's death?" Ino had hesitated, and in that hesitation, Naruto had found his answer. "My dad told me some things," she'd admitted. "Not everything, because there are laws about what can be said. But enough to understand why people are afraid of you." "Are you afraid of me?" The question had come out smaller than Naruto intended, vulnerable and desperate. "No," Ino had said immediately, firmly. I've never been afraid of you, Naruto. Frustrated sometimes, yes. Worried about your tendency to do reckless things, absolutely. But afraid? Never. Why not? Naruto had looked at her, really looked at her, searching for signs of deception or pity. If everyone else is afraid, why aren't you? Ino had thought about that, her expression serious in the dim light of his apartment. Because I know you. Not the thing people are afraid of, but you. Naruto Uzumaki, who dreams of being Hokage, who works harder than anyone I know despite having every reason to give up. Who defended me when I was being cruel to Ami, even though it would have been easier to say nothing. Who makes me want to be better just by existing. She'd taken his hand, the gesture gentle and deliberate. Whatever happened the night you were born, whatever burden you carry, it doesn't change who you are. You're my friend, Naruto. My best friend. And nothing is going to change that. Naruto had felt tears prick at his eyes, and he tried to blink them away, but Ino had seen. Instead of mocking or looking away, she'd simply pulled him into a hug, letting him bury his face in her shoulder while months of confusion and hurt had finally broken through his usual cheerful facade. I don't understand why everyone hates me, he'd sobbed into her yukata. I didn't choose to be born. I didn't choose whatever I am. Why do I have to pay for something I didn't do? You don't, Ino had said fiercely, her arms tight around him. You shouldn't have to. It's not fair, and it's not right. But Naruto, you're stronger than all of them. You keep going despite everything, and that's incredible. Don't let their fear make you doubt yourself. They'd stayed like that for a while, Naruto crying out 8 years of loneliness and confusion, while Ino held him and murmured reassurances. Finally, when the tears had subsided, they'd pulled apart, and Naruto had felt strangely lighter despite the emotional exhaustion. Thank you, he'd said, his voice hoarse. For being here. For not leaving. I'll never leave, Ino had promised, and something in her tone made it sound like a vow. You're stuck with me, Naruto. Get used to it. She'd stood to leave, and Naruto had walked her to the door, propriety requiring at least that much despite his emotional state. At the threshold, Ino had turned back. What I was going to tell you, before those boys interrupted. Yeah? Naruto had held his breath. I was going to say that you're the most important person in my life, Ino had said, the words coming out in a rush. More important than my clan duties, more important than my popularity at school, more important than anything. I don't know what that means exactly, because we're only 8 and I'm probably too young to understand. But I needed you to know that. Especially after tonight. Especially because I don't want you to ever doubt how much you matter. Naruto had stood frozen, Ino's words echoing in his mind. She'd leaned forward and kissed his cheek, quick and chaste and over in a heartbeat, before turning and hurrying down the hallway, leaving Naruto standing in his doorway, hand raised to his cheek, heart pounding. That night, lying in bed unable to sleep, Naruto had replayed the evening in his mind. The festival's joy and its harsh ending, the confirmation that there were secrets about his birth, terrible secrets that connected him to the 4th Hokage's death. Ino's comfort and her unexpected confession. He touched his cheek where she'd kissed him, feeling the ghost of her lips like a brand. She'd said he was the most important person in her life. Not just a friend, not just someone she cared about, but the most important. The revelation should have been overshadowed by everything else he'd learned that night. But somehow, it was Ino's words that stayed with him, that glowed in the darkness like a beacon. Tomorrow, he decided he would talk to the Hokage. He would demand answers about his past, about what he was and why everyone feared him. He'd lived in ignorance long enough. It was time to understand the burden he carried. But tonight, he let himself focus on the good. On Ino's arms around him. On her fierce defense. On her confession. On the promise that she'd never leave. Whatever secrets tomorrow revealed, whatever harsh truths he had to face, he wouldn't face them alone. Ino Yamanaka had promised to stay by his side. And Naruto believed her absolutely. It was enough to give him hope. And hope, he was learning, was the most powerful force in the world. The meeting with the Hokage had been arranged with surprising speed. Inoichi had contacted the Hokage's office the morning after the festival, and by afternoon, Naruto found himself climbing the stairs to the Hokage tower, his heart pounding with anxiety and determination. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, was an old man now, his face lined with wrinkles and his once dark hair pure white. But his eyes were still sharp, still kind, and he looked at Naruto with an expression that mixed affection with something that might have been guilt. "Naruto," the Hokage greeted, gesturing to a chair. "I've been expecting this conversation for some time now. I'm only surprised it took this long. I want to know the truth," Naruto had said without preamble. "About what I am. About why everyone hates me. About the fourth Hokage. Everything." The Hokage had been quiet for a long moment, studying Naruto with those penetrating eyes. Finally, he sighed deeply. "You're 8 years old, Naruto. Perhaps too young for this burden of knowledge. But then again, you've been carrying the weight of ignorance for 8 years already. Perhaps the truth is kinder." He stood and moved to the window, looking out over the village with his hands clasped behind his back. 8 years ago, on the night of your birth, the nine-tailed fox attacked our village. It was a creature of immense power, capable of leveling mountains with a swipe of its tail. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, fought the beast and ultimately sealed it away, sacrificing his life to save the village. Naruto had felt ice in his veins. He knew where this was going, had suspected since the festival, but hearing it confirmed was still devastating. He sealed the nine tails inside a newborn infant, the Hokage continued. "Into you, Naruto. You are a Jinchuriki, a human sacrifice who contains a tailed beast within their body. The fourth chose you for reasons of his own, and in doing so, he saved the village but cursed you to a life of fear and isolation." The words hung in the air like lead weights. Naruto tried to process them, to fit this information into his understanding of himself and the world. "So I'm what? A monster?" His voice had cracked on the last word. "No," the Hokage had turned sharply, his voice firm. "You are Naruto Uzumaki, a shinobi of Konoha. The nine tails is sealed within you, but it is not you. You are the prison, not the prisoner." The fourth Hokage didn't see you as a monster, he saw you as a hero, the one who would contain the beast and protect the village. "But everyone else sees me as a monster," Naruto had said bitterly. "Many do," the Hokage admitted. "They see the nine tails when they look at you, and they remember the destruction it caused. They remember loved ones killed, homes destroyed. Their fear is understandable, even if it's misdirected." "Misdirected," Naruto repeated numbly. "Is that why there are laws about talking about it? Why didn't anyone tell me? I made it forbidden to speak of your status as a Jinchuriki, hoping that the younger generation would see you as just another child, free from their parents' prejudices." The Hokage had shaken his head. It was perhaps naive. Hate and fear have a way of persisting even without explicit knowledge. Naruto had sat in silence, processing. He was a container for a demon, a weapon disguised as a child, the reason the fourth Hokage, his hero, had died. The weight of it threatened to crush him. "Why me?" he finally asked. "Why choose a baby? Why not seal it in himself or anyone else?" "That is a question only the fourth could answer, and he took his reasons to the grave," the Hokage had said. "But I knew him, Naruto. He was a good man, a brilliant shinobi. He wouldn't have chosen you without reason. Perhaps he saw something in you, some potential that made you the right choice. Or maybe he just needed a baby and I was convenient," Naruto had said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. The Hokage had returned to his desk, his expression sad. "I won't lie to you and say your life will be easy, Naruto. Carrying the nine tails is a burden few can understand. Many will continue to fear you, to hate you for circumstances beyond your control. But," he'd leaned forward, meeting Naruto's eyes, "but you are more than your burden. You have friends who see you for who you are. You have determination and strength of spirit. And you have a choice in how you respond to your circumstances." "What choice?" Naruto had asked. "I can't change what I am." "No, but you can choose what you become. The nine tails is sealed within you, but it doesn't control you. You are still Naruto Uzumaki, still the boy who dreams of becoming Hokage. This knowledge doesn't have to change unless you let it." Naruto had walked home from that meeting in a daze, the Hokage's words echoing in his mind alongside the harsh reality he now understood. He was a Jinchuriki. a container for a demon fox, the walking reminder of the village's worst tragedy. But he was also still himself. Still the boy who wanted to be Hokage. Still the friend who Ino valued above all others. The question was, which identity would define him? He'd found his answer waiting for him at his apartment. Ino sat on the steps leading to his door, still in her academy clothes, clearly having come directly from school despite his absence. When she saw him, she stood immediately. "Well?" she'd asked, her expression anxious. "Did he tell you?" "Yeah," Naruto had said. "He told me everything." And then, without really meaning to, he told her everything too. About the Nine Tails, about being a Jinchuriki, about the fourth Hokage's sacrifice. The words had poured out of him, and Ino had listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to understanding to determination. When he'd finished, she'd been quiet for a moment. Then she'd asked, "Do you feel different? Now that you know?" Naruto had considered that. "I feel heavier. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't know about, and now I can feel it. But I also feel relieved, I guess. At least I know why now. At least the mystery is solved." "Are you scared?" Ino had pressed. "Of what's inside you?" "A little," Naruto had admitted. "But mostly I'm scared of what people will do now that I know. What if I can't control it? What if I hurt someone?" "You won't," Ino had said with absolute conviction. "You've had that thing inside you your whole life, and you've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. Knowing about it doesn't change that." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you, Naruto." Ino had stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. "You're not the Nine Tails. You're not a demon. You're my best friend, and you're going to be Hokage someday. And some fox sealed inside you doesn't change any of that." Naruto had felt something break inside him, not something painful, but rather like a dam giving way to relief. He'd thrown his arms around Ino, hugging her tightly while she hugged him back. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For not running away. For not being afraid." "Never," Ino had promised. "I told you you're stuck with me." They'd pulled apart eventually, but Ino hadn't left. She'd stayed with him for hours, talking about everything and nothing, deliberately keeping the conversation light to distract from the heavy revelations of the day. She told him about what he'd missed at the academy, about Shikamaru falling asleep during a lecture and getting a chalk eraser thrown at him, about Kiba's boasting about his training with Akamaru. As evening approached and Ino had to leave for dinner, Naruto had stopped her at the door. "Ino, what you said at the festival, about me being the most important person in your life." Ino had blushed, her usual confidence faltering. "Yeah, you're the most important person in my life too," Naruto had said, the words feeling simultaneously inadequate and exactly right. "I don't know what I'd do without you. I don't think I could handle any of this without you." "You won't have to," Ino had said softly. "We're in this together, Naruto. Whatever comes next, we face it together." After she'd left, Naruto had sat in his apartment, staring at the ceiling and thinking about his conversation with the Hokage and with Ino. He knew what he was now, a Jinchuriki, a container for a demon, a weapon forged in tragedy. But he also knew who he was, Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage, and most importantly, Ino Yamanaka's best friend. The Nine Tails was part of him, perhaps inescapably. But it didn't have to define him. He could choose to be more than his burden, more than his circumstance. He could be the hero the fourth Hokage had apparently seen in him, even if he didn't understand why yet. And he could prove to everyone, to the village, to himself, to Ino, that Naruto Uzumaki was worth more than the demon inside him. It wouldn't be easy. The path ahead was lined with challenges and prejudice and dangers he couldn't yet imagine. But with Ino beside him, with friends who were slowly accepting him, with the determination that had always burned in his chest, Naruto felt like maybe, just maybe, he could do it. He would become Hokage. He would make Ino proud. And he would show the entire village that their fear had been misplaced, that he was exactly what the fourth Hokage had believed, a hero in the making. The journey was just beginning, but Naruto had never been one to shy away from a challenge. And besides, he had something no one had expected him to find, someone who believed in him completely, who stood by him despite everything, who saw not a demon but simply Naruto. In the dark of his small apartment, Naruto touched his cheek where Ino had kissed him the night before, and he smiled. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. That made all the difference. The weeks following Naruto's discovery of his Jinchuriki status were a study in contrasts. On the surface, life at the academy continued much as it had before: classes, training, the daily rhythm of student life. But underneath, everything had changed. Naruto found himself hyper-aware of the villagers' reactions now that he understood their cause. The way mothers pulled their children closer when he passed. The shopkeepers who watched him with barely concealed fear. The whispers that followed him through the streets. Before, he'd felt the hatred without understanding it. Now, knowing the reason made it simultaneously more bearable and more painful. Knowledge, he was discovering, was a double-edged blade. But there were bright spots too. Ino had become even more fiercely protective since learning the truth, her loyalty manifesting in ways both subtle and overt. She'd walk beside him through the village streets with her head held high, daring anyone to comment. She'd sit next to him in every class, her presence a buffer against the isolation that threatened to consume him. And in their private moments, on the academy roof, in the Yamanaka flower shop, during their evening study sessions, she treated him exactly as she always had, seeing Naruto rather than the Nine-Tails container. "You're staring again," Ino observed one morning as they sat on their usual bench before class. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, petals drifting through the air like pink snow. "Was not," Naruto protested automatically, though he definitely had been. He'd been watching the way sunlight caught in her hair, making it look like spun gold, and wondering for the 1000th time what he'd done to deserve her friendship. "Weird too. You've been weird lately." Ino turned to face him fully, her pale blue eyes searching his face. "Weirder than usual, I mean. What's going on in that head of yours?" Naruto considered lying, deflecting with a joke or changing the subject. But Ino had earned his honesty, and had proven time and again that she could handle the truth. "I've been thinking about the future," he admitted. "About what happens when we graduate, when we become real ninja. What if we end up on different teams? What if you get assigned to missions and I don't see you anymore?" It was a fear that had been growing in his mind, fed by the academy instructor's increasing focus on team dynamics, and the reality that graduation was only a few years away. The thought of losing Ino's constant presence, of facing the world's hostility without her support, terrified him more than he wanted to admit. Ino's expression softened. "Naruto, we're 9 years old. Graduation is still 3 years away. And even when we do graduate and get assigned to different teams, it's not like we'll never see each other. Ninjas don't just disappear." "But it won't be the same," Naruto insisted. "We won't see each other every day. You'll have your team and your missions, and I'll have mine and we'll still be friends," Ino interrupted firmly. "We'll still be important to each other. Distance doesn't change that, Naruto. I thought you knew that by now." "I do, it's just..." Naruto struggled to articulate the fear that gnawed at him. "What if you meet someone better? Someone from your team who's more talented, who doesn't have a demon sealed inside them, who doesn't cause problems everywhere they go? What if you realize you don't need me anymore?" The words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Ino was quiet for a long moment, and Naruto felt his anxiety spike, wondering if he'd finally pushed too far, revealing too much of his desperate need for her presence in his life. Then Ino did something unexpected. She reached out and flicked him hard on the forehead. "Ow! What was that for?" Naruto yelped, rubbing the spot. "For being an idiot," Ino said, but her voice was gentle despite the words. "Naruto, listen to me very carefully. You are my best friend. Not because I don't have other options, not because I feel obligated, not because I haven't met anyone better. You're my best friend because you're you. Because you make me laugh. Because you challenge me to be better. Because you see me as Ino rather than just the Yamanaka heir." She grabbed his hand, her grip tight and warm. "I'm not going to wake up one day and suddenly decide you're not worth my time. That's not how friendship works. That's not how I work. So stop torturing yourself with these what-if scenarios and trust that I mean what I say." Naruto felt something loosen in his chest, the knot of anxiety unraveling under the force of Ino's conviction. "You promise?" "I promise," Ino said solemnly. "You're stuck with me, remember? I don't break my promises." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands still clasped, cherry blossoms continuing their lazy descent around them. Then Ino spoke again, her voice carrying a different note, something almost nervous. Besides, it's not like I could replace you even if I wanted to. You're kind of irreplaceable, you know. In an annoying, loud, stubborn way. Hey! Naruto protested, but he was grinning. I'm not that annoying. You're definitely that annoying, Ino countered, but she was smiling too. But you're also brave and loyal and determined, and... She paused, her cheeks coloring slightly. And you're important to me, more important than you probably realize. Naruto felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. They'd exchanged similar sentiments before, at the festival, during emotional moments, but there was something different in Ino's tone now, something that made him acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of her hand still holding his, of the way the morning light made her look almost ethereal. You're important to me too, he managed to say, his voice coming out rougher than intended. The most important. Ino's blush deepened, and she looked away, though she didn't release his hand. We should probably get to class. Iruka-sensei will mark us late if we don't move soon. Yeah, Naruto agreed, but neither of them moved immediately. They sat there for another moment, hands clasped, either willing to break the spell of the morning. Finally Ino stood, pulling Naruto up with her. But as they walked toward the academy building, she didn't let go of his hand, and Naruto didn't pull away. Let the other students see. Let them whisper and wonder. Right now, in this moment, he had Ino's hand in his and her promise ringing in his ears, and that was enough to face whatever the day brought. If Ino had been Naruto's anchor in the storm of his complicated life, Sakura Haruno had become an unexpected variable in their dynamic. The pink-haired girl had been Ino's best friend before Naruto entered the picture, and while their friendship had never fully fractured, it had certainly cooled. Sakura's obsession with Sasuke Uchiha had only intensified over the past year. She spent her days competing with other girls for his attention, preening and giggling whenever he was nearby, and generally making herself miserable in pursuit of a boy who barely acknowledged her existence. Ino had tried to talk to her about it multiple times, but Sakura seemed incapable of seeing why Sasuke was concerned. The situation came to a head one afternoon during kunoichi training. The girls were practicing flower arrangement again, a skill that taught patience, precision, and aesthetic sense while also serving as cover for learning about poisonous plants and their applications. Ino was in her element, her natural talent with flowers on full display as she created an intricate arrangement of irises and morning glories. Sakura, seated nearby, was struggling with her own arrangement and shooting increasingly resentful glances at Ino's work. Must be nice, Sakura muttered, just loud enough for Ino to hear. Having so much free time to practice flowers because you don't have to worry about actually important training. Ino's hands still. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, Sakura said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Just that some of us are focused on becoming strong ninjas instead of playing around with plants all day. These plants include 3 different varieties that can kill you if prepared correctly and 2 that can paralyze, Ino said coolly. But sure, it's just playing around. The instructor, a senior kunoichi named Hana, cleared her throat warningly. But Sakura, emboldened by her own frustration, pressed on. At least I'm not wasting my time on someone who'll never amount to anything, Sakura said, and now her voice carried clearly through the room. Several other girls looked up, sensing drama. Everyone knows Naruto is dead last for a reason. But you keep hanging around him like he's something special. Ino set down her flowers with deliberate care, her expression shifting from annoyed to dangerous. You want to repeat that? You heard me. Sakura's face was flushed now, months of resentment pouring out. Ever since you became friends with that loser, you've changed. We used to be best friends. And now you barely talk to me because you're too busy babysitting the class clown. First of all, Ino said, her voice sharp as broken glass, Naruto isn't a loser, and calling him that just shows how shallow your judgment is. Second, we barely talk anymore because you're obsessed with a boy who doesn't know you exist. Every conversation we have revolves around Sasuke, what he said, what he did, what you think he might be thinking. It's exhausting, Sakura. At least Sasuke is worth pursuing. Sakura shot back. He's talented, he's from a prestigious clan, he actually has a future as a ninja. What does Naruto have? Nothing. He can barely pass his classes, he's awful at jutsu, and everyone in the village hates him. The room had gone completely silent. Even Hana seemed unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation play out. Ino stood slowly, her chakra flaring slightly in her agitation, a sign of how much control she'd gained over the past year. You know what the difference is between Naruto and Sasuke? Naruto actually cares about people. He works harder than anyone in our class despite having every reason to give up. He's loyal and kind and genuine. Sasuke is talented, sure, but he's also cold and dismissive and so wrapped up in his own tragedy that he can't see past his own pain. Don't you dare talk about Sasuke like that. Sakura was on her feet now too. You don't know what he's been through, and you do? Ino challenged. Have you ever actually talked to him, Sakura? Had a real conversation where he told you about his feelings, his goals, his pain? Or do you just project your fantasies onto him and call it love? Sakura's face went red then white. This is about Naruto, not Sasuke. Admit it, Ino, you're settling for someone inferior because you know you can't compete with the rest of us for Sasuke's attention. I'm not settling for anyone, Ino said coldly. I chose Naruto as my friend because he's worth choosing. And honestly, Sakura, the fact that you can't see his value says more about you than about him. Girls. Hana finally intervened, stepping between them. That's enough. Sakura, Ino, both of you need to cool down. This kind of infighting is unbecoming of the future kunoichi, but the damage was done. Sakura grabbed her things and stormed out of the classroom, leaving her half-finished flower arrangement abandoned on the table. Ino returned to her seat, her hands shaking slightly from anger and adrenaline. The other girls whispered among themselves, but Ino ignored them, focusing on completing her arrangement with meticulous precision. Only when class ended and the others had filtered out did she allow herself to slump, the weight of the confrontation settling on her shoulders. That was quite a defense, Hana observed, approaching Ino's table. Naruto Uzumaki is lucky to have such a fierce advocate. He shouldn't need one, Ino muttered. People should see his worth on their own. Perhaps, Hana agreed. But the world doesn't always work that way. Sometimes people need someone to point out that they're too blind to see themselves. She paused, studying Ino thoughtfully. You care about him quite a bit, don't you? He's my best friend, Ino said, perhaps a bit too defensively. I see. Hana's smile was knowing. Well, for what it's worth, I think Naruto is fortunate to have found someone who sees past the surface. Not many people would stand up for him the way you did today. After Hana left, Ino sat alone in the classroom, staring at her completed arrangement. The flowers were beautiful, perfectly balanced and aesthetically pleasing, but all she could think about was Sakura's words, the casual cruelty of dismissing Naruto as worthless. The worst part was that Sakura wasn't unique in her opinion. Most of the village saw Naruto the same way, as a nuisance at best, a threat at worst. And while Ino had always known this intellectually, having it thrown in her face by someone who'd once been her closest friend made it hurt in a new way. When she finally left the academy, she found Naruto waiting for her outside, as he often did after his classes ended. He was practicing kunai throws against the training posts, his form improving but still imperfect. Hey! He greeted her with his usual bright smile. How was kunoichi training? Learn anything cool? Ino considered telling him about the fight with Sakura, but looking at his happy expression, she couldn't bring herself to dim his mood. Just the usual stuff. Flowers and poisons. You know, sounds dangerous, Naruto said cheerfully, completely missing her subdued tone. Want to go to Ichiraku's? I've been craving ramen all day. Looking at him, blonde hair messy from training, whisker marks prominent on his cheeks, eyes bright with uncomplicated enthusiasm, Ino felt something fierce and protective surge in her chest. Sakura was wrong. The village was wrong. Naruto wasn't worthless or inferior. He was extraordinary in ways they were too blind to see. Sure, she agreed, forcing herself to match his energy. But you're buying this time. I got the last 3 meals. That's because you always order extra. Naruto protested, but he was grinning. Fine. But just ramen, no fancy side dishes. As they walked toward the ramen stand, Naruto chattering about his day and the new technique Irika had started teaching them, Ino made a silent promise. She would protect him from the casual cruelty of people like Sakura, from the prejudice of the village, from anyone who tried to make him feel less than he was. And maybe, just maybe, she would help him prove them all wrong. The Yamanaka flower shop had become Naruto's second home over the past year. He spent hours there after academy classes, ostensibly helping with basic tasks, but really just soaking in the warmth of being part of a family environment. Kaori had taken to teaching him about flowers with surprising patience, while Inoichi occasionally offered cryptic ninja wisdom disguised as gardening advice. Orchids, Kaori explained one evening, guiding Naruto's hands as he carefully repotted a delicate purple bloom, requiring precise conditions. Too much water and they rot. Too little and they wither. The key is finding balance. Like chakra control? Naruto asked. His tongue stuck out in concentration as he tried not to damage the roots. Exactly like chakra control, Kaori confirmed. In fact, working with plants can help develop the kind of fine control and patience that ninja need. Why do you think so many clans maintain gardens? Naruto had never thought about it. But looking around the shop, at the hundreds of plants in various stages of growth, each requiring different care and attention, he could see the parallel. Growing things required observation, patience, and the ability to adjust your approach based on subtle feedback. All skills that translated to ninja work. That's it, Kaori encouraged as Naruto finished the report. See? You're getting better at this. When you first started, you killed 3 plants in one afternoon. That was an accident. Naruto protested, though he was smiling at the memory. He'd been overeager and had overwatered everything in sight, leading to a minor disaster that Inoichi still occasionally teased him about. Ino emerged from the back room carrying a large arrangement of white lilies and red roses. A funeral arrangement, Naruto realized with a pang. Death was a constant reality for ninja families, and the flower shop saw its share of somber orders. Mom, where do you want this? Ino asked, carefully balancing the heavy vase. Near the window, dear. The Akimichi family will be picking it up soon. Kaori turned to Naruto. Why don't you help Ino with the evening watering? I need to finish the accounts. Left alone in the main shop, Naruto and Ino fell into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over countless evenings. Naruto handled the larger, sturdier plants while Ino dealt with the more delicate specimens, both working in companionable silence. Can I ask you something? Naruto said eventually, his voice hesitant. Always, Ino replied without looking up from the bonsai she was tending. Why did you really start being my friend? Back at the academy, on that first day. You could have just walked away after you made those boys leave. But you stayed. Why? Ino's hands still. It was a question Naruto had asked before in various forms, but tonight there was something more vulnerable in his tone, something that suggested he needed a real answer. She set down her watering can and turned to face him fully. Do you remember what you told me that first day? When I asked if you'd eaten lunch? Naruto shook his head. You said not really, but you were smiling when you said it. Like it didn't matter that you'd been sitting alone with cold ramen. Like you were just happy someone was talking to you. Ino's expression was distant, remembering. It broke my heart a little, that smile. Because I recognized it. Recognized it? Naruto moved closer, drawn by the unusual introspection in her voice. I'm the Yamanaka heir, Ino explained. I've spent my whole life learning to smile even when I'm overwhelmed, to appear confident even when I'm terrified of disappointing my clan. I know what it's like to put on a brave face because you think that's what people need to see. And when I saw you doing the same thing, pretending to be fine when you clearly weren't, I felt connected, I guess. Like we understood something about each other. She picked up a small potted moonflower, the same type she'd shown Naruto on his first visit to the shop. Plus, you reminded me of this. Everyone assumes moonflowers are fragile because they're beautiful and only bloom at night. But they're actually incredibly resilient. They just need the right conditions to show their strength. She met his eyes. I saw the same thing in you. Everyone assumed you were weak or troublesome, but I saw resilience. I saw strength waiting for the right conditions to bloom. Naruto felt his throat tighten with emotion. That's way nicer than I expected. What did you think I'd say? Ino asked, amused despite the serious conversation. I don't know. Maybe you felt sorry for me or something. I did feel sorry for you, Ino admitted bluntly. But pity isn't enough to sustain a friendship for over a year, Naruto. I stayed your friend because I genuinely like you. Because you make me laugh and challenge me and accept me for who I am beyond my clan name. Because being around you makes me want to be better. She moved closer, and Naruto found himself holding his breath as she reached up to adjust his headband, which had slipped during their work. Her hands lingered for a moment, and Naruto was acutely aware of how close they were, of the faint scent of flowers that always clung to her, of the way the shop's lighting made her eyes look more silver than blue. Besides, Ino added, her voice dropping to something softer, more intimate, you're not just my friend anymore, Naruto. You're my best friend. My person. The one I tell everything to, the one who sees all of me, the confident parts, and the scared parts, and everything in between. That's not something you can fake or force. It just is. You're my person too, Naruto managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. The most important person in my life. They stood there for a moment, close enough that Naruto could count the faint freckles on Ino's nose, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her. Something hung in the air between them, something undefined but significant, like they were standing on the edge of understanding something important. The moment broke when Kaori called from the back room, asking for help with inventory. Ino stepped back quickly, her cheeks pink, and Naruto exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. But as they returned to their watering duties, stealing glances at each other when they thought the other wasn't looking, both felt that something had shifted between them. The foundation of their friendship remained solid, but something else was building on top of it. Something neither of them quite had the vocabulary to name yet, but both felt growing stronger with each passing day. That night, as Naruto walked home through the darkening streets, he thought about Ino's words. About being resilient. About being her person. About needing the right conditions to bloom. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had always had strength within him, just waiting for someone to see it and nurture it. And maybe, with Ino's friendship and faith in him, he could finally grow into the person he was meant to be. The person who would prove everyone wrong. The person who would become Hokage. And the person who would always be worthy of Ino Yamanaka's friendship. And maybe, someday, something more. If there was one person whose existence complicated Naruto's academy experience more than anyone else, it was Sasuke Uchiha. The last surviving member of the once prestigious Uchiha clan stood as a constant reminder of everything Naruto wasn't. Talented, acclaimed, desired by seemingly every girl in their year. But the dynamic between Naruto and Sasuke in this timeline was different from what it might have been. Without Sakura as a point of rivalry, without the jealousy that might have come from competing for the same girl's affection, their relationship existed in a strange liminal space between rivalry and reluctant respect. Again, Iruka called out, watching as Naruto and Sasuke faced each other in the training yard. The instructor had paired them for sparring, as he often did, believing that Naruto improved fastest when pushed by someone superior. Naruto charged forward, his taijutsu form better than it had been a year ago, but still lacking the refinement of clan training. Sasuke dodged effortlessly, his Sharingan not yet awakened but his natural talent more than sufficient to read Naruto's obvious tells. The spar ended as it always did, with Naruto on his back, breathing hard, while Sasuke barely looked winded. "You're too straightforward," Sasuke observed, offering a hand to help Naruto up, a gesture he wouldn't have made for most students. "I can see every move before you make it." "Yeah, well, not all of us have fancy clan techniques," Naruto grumbled, but he took the offered hand. "It's not about techniques. It's about thinking." Sasuke's dark eyes studied Naruto with something that might have been curiosity. "You've improved a lot over the past year. You're not the same dead last kid from before. But you still fight with your emotions instead of your head." "What's wrong with emotions?" Naruto challenged. "Some things are worth getting emotional about." "Emotions make you predictable," Sasuke countered. "An enemy who knows what you care about can use it against you." Across the training yard, Ino watched the exchange with interest. She noticed how Sasuke interacted with Naruto differently than he did with his fangirls or even his peers. There was a grudging respect there, perhaps recognition of Naruto's determination even if not his skill. "He's not wrong," Shikamaru observed, appearing at Ino's side with his usual lazy demeanor. "Naruto wears his heart on his sleeve." Makes him easy to manipulate if you know which buttons to push. Naruto's passion is his strength, not his weakness, Ino argued. It's what keeps him going when anyone else would have given up. Can it be both? Shikamaru asked philosophically. Strength and weakness are often two sides of the same trait. Like how your confidence makes you a natural leader, but it also means you sometimes bulldoze over other people's feelings. Ino shot him a sharp look. When have I bulldozed over people's feelings? Sakura, Shikamaru said simply. The whole Sasuke thing. You weren't exactly gentle when you pointed out her obsession. Ino winced. The fight with Sakura still stung, made worse by the fact that Sakura had been avoiding her ever since. That was different. She was saying awful things about Naruto. Was she wrong about his skill level? Shikamaru pressed. I'm not saying she was right to be cruel about it. But factually, Naruto is near the bottom of our class in most metrics. Defending him doesn't change reality. Reality can change, Ino insisted. Naruto is improving faster than anyone gives him credit for. Just because he's not top of the class doesn't mean he won't surpass everyone eventually. Maybe, Shikamaru allowed. Or maybe you see potential that isn't there because you care about him. Either way, it's troublesome. Caring about people always is. Before Ino could formulate a response, Naruto's voice rang out across the training yard. One more time. I'm going to land a hit this time, believe it. Sasuke sighed but nodded, falling into a ready stance. You said that the last 3 times. 4th time's the charm. This spar went differently. Naruto came in with his usual straightforward attack, but at the last moment, he dropped and swept at Sasuke's legs, a feint that Sasuke dodged. But the dodge put him off balance for just a moment, and Naruto used that moment to launch a punch that actually connected with Sasuke's shoulder. It wasn't a devastating hit. Sasuke barely moved from the impact. But Naruto had landed a blow, something he'd never managed in their previous spars. The training yard went quiet. Other students stopped their own exercises to stare. Even Irika looked surprised. Sasuke rubbed his shoulder, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he smirked. Not bad done. You actually made me work for that dodge. I hit you! Naruto crowed, pumping his fist in the air. Did everyone see that? I hit Sasuke Uchiha. Don't let it go to your head, Sasuke said, but there was no real bite in his tone. It was one punch, and it barely qualified as a hit. But, he paused, as if the next words cost him something, but it was clever. Using a feint to create an opening. That's progress. Naruto's grin could have lit up the village. He looked immediately to Ino, his eyes seeking her out in the crowd, and when he found her, his smile somehow grew even brighter. Ino found herself smiling back, proud of his small victory in a way that felt disproportionate to the achievement, but absolutely appropriate to her feelings. See? She said to Shikamaru. Progress. He's learning, adapting. That's what matters. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered, but even he looked slightly impressed. Though I notice he looked to you first, not to Irika or the other students. That's interesting. What's interesting about it? Ino asked, though her cheeks felt warm. Just that his first instinct after accomplishing something is to share it with you. To see your reaction. To make sure you're proud of him. Shikamaru's eyes were sharp despite his lazy posture. That's not standard best friend behavior, Ino. That's something else. Ino didn't respond, because she didn't have a response that wouldn't be defensive or revealing. But Shikamaru's words stuck with her for the rest of the day, turning over in her mind like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Later, after classes ended and most students had dispersed, Ino found Naruto still at the training yard, practicing his taijutsu forms with single-minded intensity. Sweat dripped down his face, and his movements were getting sloppy from fatigue, but he didn't stop. You're going to hurt yourself if you keep pushing like this, Ino observed, approaching him. Naruto jumped, nearly falling over in surprise. Ino! I didn't hear you come up, because you were too focused. She held out a water bottle she retrieved from her bag. Take a break. You've earned it after hitting Sasuke. Naruto accepted the water gratefully, drinking half the bottle in one go. It was just one punch. Not exactly a major victory. It was more than just one punch, Ino countered. It was proof that you're improving, that your hard work is paying off. A year ago, you couldn't have landed that feint. You've grown, Naruto. You should be proud. I am proud, Naruto admitted. But I'm also frustrated. Sasuke is still way better than me. He barely had to try, and he still won the spar. How am I supposed to catch up when the gap is so big? Ino sat down on the grass, patting the spot beside her. After a moment's hesitation, Naruto joined her, both of them looking out at the training yard that had seen countless hours of Naruto's efforts. Do you know what my father told me once? Ino asked. He said that comparing yourself to others is the fastest way to lose motivation, because there will always be someone more talented, more experienced, more naturally gifted. The only comparison that matters is the one between who you are today and who you were yesterday. That sounds wise, Naruto said. But it doesn't help when I'm in a spar and getting my butt kicked. No, Ino agreed. But it helps afterward, when you're deciding whether to give up or keep trying. Yesterday Naruto couldn't touch Sasuke in spar. Today's Naruto landed a hit. Tomorrow's Naruto might land 2 hits. And eventually, someday Naruto might actually win. You really think so? Naruto looked at her, his blue eyes intense and hopeful. I know so, Ino said firmly. Because you're the most stubborn person I've ever met, and stubbornness is its own kind of talent. You don't give up, Naruto. That's your advantage. Sasuke might be more skilled now, but he's also... She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He's carrying pain that makes him reckless. He pushes himself because he's running from something, not towards something. You push yourself because you're running toward your dream. That difference matters. Naruto was quiet for a moment, processing. Do you think he's okay? Sasuke, I mean. He always looks so alone. The question surprised Ino. After all their spars, after all the comparisons and competition, Naruto's first instinct was concern for his rival's well-being. It was so fundamentally Naruto that Ino felt her chest tighten with affection. I don't know, she admitted. He lost his entire clan. That kind of trauma. I can't imagine how he copes with it. He probably isn't okay. But he also doesn't seem to want help or friendship from anyone. Maybe he doesn't know how to ask, Naruto suggested. Maybe he thinks he has to be strong all the time, carry everything alone. Maybe, Ino agreed. But Naruto, you can't save everyone. Some people have to choose to let others in. I know, Naruto said. I know what it's like to be alone. Even with you and your family and our friends, I remember what it was like before. How it felt like I was drowning and no one would throw me a rope. I don't want anyone else to feel that way if I can help it. And there it was, the core of who Naruto was. Someone who'd suffered tremendously but who didn't want others to suffer the same way. Someone who'd been saved by kindness and wanted to pay it forward. Someone whose pain had made him more compassionate rather than more bitter. Ino reached over and took his hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become increasingly natural over the past year. That's what makes you special, Naruto. That empathy. That refusal to let your own pain make you cruel. Hold on to that, okay? Even when things get hard, even when people disappoint you or hurt you. Hold on to your kindness. Naruto looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Ino's face. In the fading afternoon light, with the shadows of the training posts stretching long across the ground, something passed between them, a moment of understanding, of connection, of something deeper than simple friendship. Ino, Naruto started, his voice uncertain. Can I ask you something kind of weird? Always. Do you ever wonder about the future? Like, not just what team we'll be on or what missions we'll do, but bigger things. Like who we'll become, who'll be important to us, who we'll. He trailed off, his cheeks reddening. Who will we end up with? Ino finished, her own cheeks warming despite the directness of the question. Yeah. That. Ino considered the question carefully. At 9 years old, thoughts of romance still felt distant and theoretical. But she couldn't deny that something was developing between her and Naruto. Something that existed in the space between friendship and something more, waiting for them to grow old enough to understand it fully. I think, she said slowly, that the person I end up with would have to be someone who knows me completely. Who sees all my flaws and strengths and accepts both. Someone who challenges me to be better but also accepts me when I'm not. Someone I can trust absolutely. That sounds nice, Naruto said softly. What about you? Ino asked. What would your perfect person be like? Naruto didn't hesitate. Someone who never gave up on me. Someone who saw something in me when no one else did. Someone who makes me want to be worthy of them, to reach higher than I ever thought I could. He squeezed her hand. Someone like you. The words hung in the air between them, more honest than Naruto probably intended. Ino felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. A flutter of feelings she was too young to name, but old enough to recognize as significant. Naruto, she whispered. But whatever she was going to say was interrupted by the academy bell signaling that the grounds would close soon. They stood together, hands reluctantly separating, both acutely aware that something important had almost been said but remained unspoken. As they walked toward the academy gates, their fingers brushed occasionally, and neither moved away. Race you to Ichiraku's? Naruto suggested, his usual energy returning. You're on, Ino agreed, grateful for the return to normalcy even as part of her regretted the interrupted moment. But when I win, you're buying dessert too. When will you win? You mean if? Naruto took off running, laughing when Ino shouted about him cheating with a head start. As they raced through the village streets, drawing amused looks from civilians and ninja alike, the tension of their earlier conversation dissolved into the easy camaraderie they built over a year of friendship. But underneath, for both of them, something had shifted, an acknowledgement of feelings that existed but couldn't quite be named yet, waiting for them to grow into understanding. For now, friendship was enough. But both sensed that someday, maybe sooner than they expected, it would become something more. And neither was entirely sure if that prospect excited or terrified them, probably both. As Naruto and Ino entered their final year at the academy, the specter of team assignments loomed large. The students who'd spent years training together would soon be split into three-person teams, their futures as ninja determined by the wisdom, or whim, of their instructors and the Hokage. The approaching change created a strange tension in their year. Students who'd been rivals began assessing each other differently, wondering who they might be paired with. Friends worried about being separated, and everyone speculated endlessly about the possible combinations. I heard they tried to balance teams, Shikamaru mentioned during one of their lunch sessions on the roof. Their group had expanded over the years. Now it regularly included Shikamaru, Choji, and occasionally Kiba and Hinata. One skilled student, one average, one who needs work. That's not very encouraging for those of us in the needs work category. Naruto grumbled around a mouthful of rice. You're not in that category anymore, Ino corrected. You're solidly average now. Maybe even slightly above in taijutsu and determination. Wow, such high praise, Naruto said sarcastically, but he was smiling. Ino's constant support had done wonders for his confidence, even when she was honest about his limitations. I wonder who I'll get stuck with, Kiba mused. Akamaru, now considerably larger than he'd been years ago, barked from his perch on Kiba's head. Hopefully someone who can keep up with me and Akamaru. Keep up with you? Naruto challenged. I seem to remember beating you in our last spar. That was one time. And you got lucky. Luck is just a skill you don't recognize, Naruto shot back with a grin. Watching them bicker good-naturedly, Ino felt the bittersweet reality of their situation. These lunch sessions, these easy friendships, would change after graduation. They'd still see each other, but not daily. Not with this casual intimacy they'd developed over years of shared classes and training. You're thinking too loudly, Shikamaru observed. It's troublesome. I'm allowed to think, Ino retorted. About what? Choji asked through a mouthful of chips. Team assignments? Among other things. The truth was that Ino had been thinking about team assignments constantly, running through possibilities and dreading most of them. The ideal scenario would be getting assigned to the same team as Naruto, but she knew that was unlikely. The instructors knew about their friendship. They'd probably deliberately separate them to encourage independence. What if, Naruto said suddenly, his voice uncharacteristically serious, we end up on completely different missions right away? Like, what if you get assigned to a great team and start taking important missions, and I'm stuck doing grunt work because my team isn't as strong? Then you work harder until your team is strong, Ino said immediately. And we meet up whenever we're both in the village. Naruto, we've been over this. Team assignments don't end friendships. I know, but nothing. Ino cut him off firmly. We're going to graduate, get assigned to teams, and start our careers as ninja. And yes, things will change. But the important stuff won't. We'll still be best friends. We'll still support each other. We'll still be in each other's lives. Promise? Naruto's voice was small, vulnerable in a way he rarely allowed around others. Promise, Ino confirmed, meeting his eyes with unwavering certainty. Shikamaru cleared his throat meaningfully. You two realize everyone can see this extremely emotional moment you're having, right? Shut up, Shikamaru, Ino and Naruto said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. The moment broke, and conversation returned to speculation about team assignments and graduation requirements. But Ino noticed how Naruto stayed close to her for the rest of lunch, their shoulders touching, as if he needed the physical reassurance of her presence. That evening, Ino stayed late at the flower shop, helping her mother prepare arrangements for an upcoming wedding. The repetitive work of trimming stems and arranging blooms gave her mind room to wander, and she found herself thinking about Naruto's fear of being separated. You're worried about graduation, Kaori observed. It wasn't a question. Is it that obvious? Ino asked. Only to someone who knows you. Kaori set down the roses she'd been working with. Is this about team assignments? About potentially being separated from Naruto? Ino nodded, not trusting her voice. You care about him very much, Kaori said gently. More than just as a friend, I think. He is my friend, Ino protested. But her mother's knowing look made her deflate. I don't know what else he is. I don't know what I want him to be. I just know that the thought of not seeing him every day makes me feel wrong. Like something important would be missing. That's normal, Kaori assured her. You've built your life around this friendship. It's natural to fear losing it, but I won't lose it, right? Ino looked at her mother pleadingly. People maintain friendships across teams all the time. They do, Kaori agreed. But Ino, honey, I think you need to consider that what you feel for Naruto might be developing into something beyond friendship. And if it is, you need to think about what that means. I'm 11 years old, Ino said. I'm too young for whatever you're implying. You're 11 now, Kaori acknowledged. But you'll be 12 soon, then 13, then 14. These feelings don't wait for you to be ready for them. They develop at their own pace. Ino was quiet, considering. She thought about how her heart raced when Naruto smiled at her. How she looked for him first thing every morning. How his opinion mattered more than anyone else's. How the thought of him being hurt or sad made her chest ache. How sometimes, when he looked at her with those intense blue eyes, she felt like she might catch fire from the warmth in her chest. I don't know what to do with these feelings, she admitted quietly. If they even are what you're suggesting. You don't have to do anything yet, Kaori said. You're both still young, still figuring out who you are. But Ino, if these feelings continue to grow, you'll eventually need to decide if you want to tell him. And you'll need to consider what it would mean for your friendship if you do. What if he doesn't feel the same way? The fear spilled out before Ino could stop it. What if I tell him and it ruins everything? Then you'll handle it, Kaori said simply. You're strong, Ino. Stronger than you give yourself credit for. Whatever happens, you'll survive it. But surviving wasn't the same as being happy, Ino thought. And the idea of losing Naruto's friendship, of making things awkward or weird between them, was almost worse than never knowing if he felt the same way. For now, Kaori continued, just focus on being his friend and supporting him through graduation. The rest will come in its own time. Ino nodded, accepting the wisdom even if she wasn't entirely convinced. But as she returned to arranging flowers, she couldn't stop thinking about what her mother had said. Did she have romantic feelings for Naruto? Or was this just the intensity of their friendship, magnified by her fear of losing it? And if she did have feelings, what did that mean for their future? Questions without answers, she realized. And ones she couldn't solve by overthinking them, much as she wanted to. So instead, she focused on the flowers, on the familiar work, and on the knowledge that tomorrow she'd see Naruto again. And that would be enough. For now, the final year at the academy brought increased pressure and intensity. Training sessions grew longer and more demanding. Academic requirements became more rigorous, and the underlying current of competition sharpened as students realized they were being evaluated not just for graduation but for team placement. Naruto threw himself into training with renewed fervor. He'd never be the genius that Sasuke was or have the natural talent of the clan heirs, but he could work harder than anyone else. He arrived at the academy before dawn to practice, stayed after classes until forced to leave, and spent his evenings either training or studying with Ino. The improvement was noticeable. His chakra control, while still mediocre, had progressed from abysmal to merely poor. His taijutsu had reached a level where he could hold his own against most of his classmates, even if he still lost more often than he won. And his tactical thinking, sharpened by countless strategy sessions with Ino and Shikamaru, had developed beyond his previous tendency to simply charge headfirst into problems. "You're going to burn yourself out," Ino warned one evening as Naruto practiced kunai throwing by lamplight, his hands shaking from exhaustion. They were in the small training area behind the Yamanaka shop, a space Inoichi had grudgingly allowed them to use after Naruto proved he wouldn't accidentally destroy the plants. "I'm fine," Naruto insisted, throwing another kunai. It missed the target entirely, clattering against the fence. "You're exhausted," Ino corrected, walking over and physically taking the remaining kunai from his hands. "When's the last time you had a full night's sleep?" Naruto didn't answer, which was answer enough. "That's what I thought." Ino grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the shop's back entrance. "Come on. Mom made extra dinner, and you're going to eat and then rest before you hurt yourself." "Ino, I can't," Naruto protested weakly. "I'm still behind everyone else. If I don't train, if you don't rest, you'll be too tired to perform well when it matters," Ino interrupted. "Haven't you been listening to anything Iruka-sensei says about balance? Rest is part of training, Naruto. Your body needs time to recover." She pulled him into the shop's kitchen where Kawari had indeed prepared extra food. As Naruto ate, first reluctantly, then with increasing enthusiasm once his hunger made itself known, Ino watched him with a mixture of affection and concern. He'd grown over the past year, shooting up in height so that he was finally taller than her, a fact he'd celebrated obnoxiously. His face had lost some of its baby roundness, his features sharpening toward the young man he'd become. The whisker marks on his cheeks remained, but somehow they seemed less like a deformity and more like a distinctive feature, giving his face character. More than his physical changes though, Naruto had developed a presence, not the overwhelming kind that Sasuke carried, but something uniquely his own, a warmth, an energy, a determination that seemed to affect everyone around him. People who'd once avoided him now greeted him in the hallways. Younger students looked up to him. Even some of the instructors had started treating him with something approaching respect. "What?" Naruto asked, noticing her stare. "Nothing," Ino said quickly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how different you are from when we first met." Ino smiled. "Remember when you couldn't hit a target from 5 feet away? Now you're actually pretty good." "Pretty good isn't good enough," Naruto said, but there was no bitterness in his tone. "Sasuke can nail a bullseye from 50 feet. I need to be better than pretty good if I'm going to be Hokage." "You will be," Ino assured him. "But not if you train yourself into the ground. Even the Hokage needs to rest sometimes." "How do you know?" Naruto challenged playfully. "Maybe the Hokage never sleeps. Maybe that's the secret to being successful." "The secret to being successful is having people around you who force you to take care of yourself," Ino countered. "Which is why you're lucky to have me." "I know," Naruto said softly, his playful expression shifting to something more sincere. "I am lucky. I don't think I'd have made it this far without you." "You would have," Ino disagreed. "You're too stubborn to give up. But maybe it would have been harder. Lonelier. Definitely lonelier." Naruto set down his chopsticks, his meal finished. "Ino, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I'm scared," Naruto admitted, his voice quiet. "About graduation, about team assignments, about everything changing. I know I act confident and like I'm not worried, but I am. What if I get assigned to a team that doesn't work well together? What if my teammates resent me because of what I am? What if I let them down?" Ino reached across the table and took his hand. "Then you'll deal with it. You'll work hard, you'll prove yourself, and you'll make them respect you. Just like you did here." "But what if, Naruto? Ino squeezed his hand. Stop borrowing trouble. You don't know what team you'll get or what challenges you'll face. All you can do is prepare as best you can and trust that you'll handle whatever comes. And remember that no matter what team you're assigned to, no matter what happens, you'll have people supporting you. Your team might change, but your friends won't abandon you. Promise? It was a question Naruto had asked multiple times over the years, always with the same underlying fear that eventually everyone would leave. Promise, Ino confirmed, as she always did. You're not getting rid of me, Naruto. Not now, not after graduation, not ever. Got it? Naruto nodded, his grip on her hand tightening briefly before releasing. Got it. Later, after Naruto had been sent home with strict instructions to actually sleep, Ino found her father in the shop's greenhouse, tending to some particularly delicate medicinal plants. Naruto seemed stressed, and Noichi observed without looking up from his work. He's terrified of graduation, Ino admitted. Of things changing, of being separated from people he cares about. Are you talking about him or yourself? And Noichi's eyes were knowing when he finally looked at his daughter. Ino sighed. Both of us, I guess. Is it normal to be this scared of change? Perfectly normal, Noichi assured her. Change is frightening, especially when you're young and your entire world has been structured around a certain routine. But Ino, change is also how we grow. The academy has been good for you both, but it's also been safe. Graduating means facing the real world of being a shinobi, the dangers, the responsibilities, the reality that every mission could be your last. That's not making me feel better, Dad. I'm not trying to make you feel better, Noichi said bluntly. I'm trying to prepare you for reality. Being a ninja isn't like the academy. It's harder, more dangerous, more demanding, and your friendship with Naruto is going to be tested in ways you can't predict yet. What do you mean? Ino asked warily. I mean that you won't be able to be there for him every day like you are now. He'll face challenges without you. He'll suffer setbacks you can't fix, and he'll have to learn to rely on himself and his team rather than running to you every time things get difficult. Noichi set down his gardening tools. That's going to be hard for both of you. Are you saying I shouldn't be his friend anymore? Ino felt defensive anger rising. Not at all. I'm saying you need to prepare yourself for a different kind of friendship. One where you support each other from a distance rather than being together constantly. And Ino, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I'm saying you need to make sure Naruto develops his own support system beyond just you. It's not healthy for him to be so dependent on one person, no matter how much you care about him. The words stung because they touched on something Ino had been trying not to think about. Naruto did rely on her heavily, for emotional support, for motivation, for validation. While she was happy to provide those things, her father was right that it wasn't sustainable long term. I don't want to push him away, Ino said quietly. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to encourage him to build other connections too. To develop confidence that comes from within rather than from your approval. To be his friend rather than his crutch. Ino nodded slowly, accepting the wisdom even as it made her uncomfortable. Okay. I'll try. That's all I ask. Noichi pulled her into a brief hug. You're a good friend, Ino. Better than Naruto probably deserves, though don't tell him I said that. Just remember to take care of yourself too. Your feelings matter just as much as his. After leaving the greenhouse, Ino lay in bed thinking about her father's words. Was she enabling Naruto's dependence on her? Was their friendship healthy, or had it become something unbalanced? She thought about their daily routines, how Naruto's mood often depended on her reactions, how he sought her approval before anyone else's. And she thought about her own feelings, how much of her identity had become wrapped up in being Naruto's support, his defender, his person. Maybe her father was right. Maybe graduation would be good for them, forcing them both to develop independence even as they maintained their friendship. But the thought of seeing Naruto less, of not being able to support him daily, made her chest ache with preemptive loss. She'd figure it out, she decided. Somehow, they'd both figure out how to grow as individuals while maintaining what they had together. They'd have to, because the alternative, losing Naruto's presence in her life, was unthinkable. Spring arrived with unusual warmth, coating Konoha in a blanket of cherry blossoms and mild temperatures that made training outdoors almost pleasant. The students, now in the final months before graduation, felt the weight of impending change with every passing day. Naruto had taken Inoichi's advice to heart, even if he didn't know he was doing so. He'd started spending more time with Shikamaru and Choji, developing friendships that existed independently of Ino. He'd even struck up an unlikely friendship with Kiba after they'd been paired for a particularly difficult training exercise and had managed to not kill each other. But Ino remained his anchor, his primary support, the person he gravitated toward whenever given the choice. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, with classes finished early due to instructor meetings, Naruto had asked Ino to accompany him somewhere. She'd agreed readily, curious about the mysterious tone in his voice. He led her away from the academy, through the village streets, and eventually up a winding path to the top of the Hokage monument. It was a place they'd visited before, but usually not during the day when other villagers might see them. "Why are we here?" Ino asked, slightly breathless from the climb. "I wanted to show you something," Naruto said, leading her to the very top of the fourth Hokage's head. From here, the view of Konoha was spectacular. The entire village spread out below them, buildings and streets and training grounds visible in miniature. "It's beautiful," Ino breathed. "Yeah," Naruto agreed, but he wasn't looking at the village. He was looking at her, his expression nervous and determined in equal measure. "Ino, there's something I need to tell you." Ino's heart rate picked up. There was something in Naruto's tone, in his posture, that suggested whatever he was about to say was important. "Okay, I've been thinking a lot about graduation," Naruto started, his words coming out in a rush. "About teams and missions and the future. And I've realized something important." "What's that?" Ino's voice was barely above a whisper. "You're the most important person in my life," Naruto said, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You've been my best friend for years, but you're more than that. You're my person. The one I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. The one whose opinion matters more than anyone else's. The one who makes me want to be better, stronger, more worthy." Ino felt like her heart might burst out of her chest. This sounded like, it felt like, was Naruto about to. "And I need you to know that no matter what team I get assigned to, no matter what happens after graduation, that won't change," Naruto continued. "You'll always be my most important person. My best friend. I needed you to know that. Officially, best friend." The words settled like a weight in Ino's chest, simultaneously relieving and disappointing. This wasn't a confession of romantic feelings. This was Naruto reaffirming their friendship, making sure she understood how much she meant to him, which was wonderful. Important. Exactly what she should want. So why did she feel this pang of disappointment? "You're my most important person too," Ino managed to say, her voice steady despite the complicated emotions churning inside her. "Always have been, always will be." Naruto's smile was brilliant, relieved, and Ino realized he'd been genuinely nervous about this conversation. That he'd feared she might not feel the same way about their friendship. "There's something else," Naruto said, his nervousness returning. "And I'm not sure how to say this without sounding weird." "You can tell me anything," Ino encouraged, though part of her wondered if she could handle whatever came next. "I think." Naruto's cheeks reddened, and he looked away, focusing on the village below. "I think I might have feelings for you. Like more than friend feelings. But I don't really understand them yet, and I don't know if I should even be having them because we're still young and it might make things weird between us and..." "Naruto," Ino interrupted, her heart racing. "Stop spiraling." He looked at her, his blue eyes vulnerable and scared. "Are you mad?" "No," Ino said truthfully. "I'm not mad. I think I might have those feelings too. The more than friend kind. But you're right that we're young and we don't really understand what they mean yet. So what do we do?" Naruto asked, and Ino loved that he approached this like a tactical problem to be solved rather than some grand romantic gesture. "I think," Ino said slowly, thinking through each word, "we acknowledge that these feelings exist. We don't ignore them or pretend they're not there. But we also don't have to act on them right now. We're about to graduate, about to face huge changes in our lives. Maybe we just..." Let these feelings exist and see what happens as we grow. That sounds really mature, Naruto observed. One of us has to be, Ino teased, but her voice was gentle. So we're still best friends? Naruto sought confirmation. Nothing has to change? We're still best friends, Ino confirmed. But maybe best friends who acknowledge that someday. When we're older and ready, this might turn into something more. I can work with that, Naruto said, his smile returning. Though for the record, if we ever do become something more, I'm going to be the best boyfriend in the history of boyfriends. I'll buy you flowers from your own shop and everything. Ino laughed, the tension of the moment breaking into something lighter. You'll buy me flowers from my own shop? That's your grand romantic gesture? I'll buy you ramen too, Naruto added. The expensive kind with extra toppings. Wow, you really know how to sweep a girl off her feet, Ino said sarcastically. But she was smiling. I'm just saying, when the time comes, you're going to be very impressed with my romantic abilities, Naruto insisted. I'll hold you to that, Ino promised. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling into something manageable. They'd acknowledged their feelings without forcing them into a premature resolution. They'd given themselves permission to explore whatever this was between them without the pressure of defining it immediately. It felt right. Mature in a way that surprised them both. For what it's worth, Ino said eventually, I think you're going to be amazing after graduation. Whatever team you get, whatever missions you face, you're going to prove everyone wrong about you. And I can't wait to watch it happen. You think so? Naruto asked. I know so, Ino said firmly. Because you're Uzumaki Naruto, the boy who never gives up. The boy who's going to be Hokage someday. And nothing, not team assignments, not difficult missions, not the village's prejudice, is going to stop you from reaching that goal. Naruto grabbed her hand, lacing their fingers together in the gesture that had become so natural between them. And you'll be there to see it, right? When will I become Hokage? Front row seat, Ino promised. Though by then, I'll probably be too busy being an amazing jonin to be properly impressed. You'll be impressed, Naruto said confidently. Everyone will be. They stayed on the monument until sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples, talking about everything and nothing, their hands clasped and their futures uncertain but somehow less frightening when faced together. As they climbed down and walked back toward the village, Naruto turned to Ino one more time. Hey Ino? Yeah? Thanks. For being honest with me. For not freaking out when I told you about my feelings. For just being you. Thanks for telling me, Ino replied. And for being brave enough to be honest even though it was scary. Everything's less scary with you around, Naruto admitted. Good, Ino said. Because you're stuck with me, remember? Best thing I'm stuck with, Naruto said with a grin. As they parted ways at the street that led to Ino's house, with promises to meet at the academy the next morning, both felt like something important had shifted between them. Not a dramatic change, but a subtle evolution, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing for years, finally brought into the light. They weren't ready to be anything more than best friends yet. But someday, when they were older and stronger and more certain of themselves, maybe they would be.